60 some odd pounds of homemade explosives was buried underneath the road, and detonated directly underneath me. And I'm in this black room and everything's okay. Like, I'm super chill. Like, I'm super just like.
And you remember that?
That's the next place my consciousness picked up, was me being like, just like hanging out. And I remember kind of being like, relieved. And I was like, why? Like, what was I doing? Like, why am I at peace so much right now? I asked, like, I remember I could see my thoughts. I remember being able to call up my thoughts. And I remember kind of being like, why is the water cooler trying to come up my butt, was really what I was thinking.
Come on my butt?
Yeah, literally. And it's because I was sitting on a water cooler when that charge detonated underneath me. And so I felt all that pressure. And I was like, and I guess that was my last thought. And then I started to kind of realize, like, oh my gosh, like, I think I'm dead. You've been doing this your whole life, you've been acting?
No, definitely not, man. Definitely not.
Seem like,
I definitely,
like
definitely
not.
It's funny
exactly.
because it's like, that's what, contrary to popular belief, there's actually more kind of normal type people doing it than I think people think. I think that, like, just like anything else, like with any profession, with any sort of passion, there comes this sort of like stereotype of the kind of folks that do it. And I don't know if you feel this way or not. I feel like stereotypes are there for a reason. There's a lot of truth to them.
I love fried chicken. I love watermelon. Like, it just is what it is.
It is what it is, man. But so there's definitely that. Yeah. But I find, like, in my thing, look, man, I come from, really growing up sports, that was really my main focus. Never any really thought, no real conception of what it would be to be an artist. Wow. I had a grandfather who grew up in Brooklyn. All his brothers were champion boxers, and he was a basketball player, and he got a half basketball scholarship, half violin scholarship to Syracuse, and went when he was real young. So, like, there was this sort of artistic bent, but that was kind of the only, but like, grew up really, playing sports and just kind of doing that fully, and getting in a lot of trouble. That was always, I just like hit every wall you could possibly. And now as a parent, I'm like, fuck, man,
how did
like,
I survive?
How did I survive?
And are my kids gonna be like me?
And it's like, stop that. It's like, I'm trying, like, oh fuck, like,
I'm right there with you. Yeah. You see little things and you're like, okay,
oh shit,
right. There it is. That's gonna be a thing.
And you think about, like, what you put your own parents. For me, I think about, like, what I put my parents through, and by the grace of God, and how indebted I am. To my parents, especially, like my father, for not giving up on me, and for, like, first time I got locked up, like, it was like I had to go the weekend at, Montgomery County Jail. My old man, like, he was out in his car the whole time I was in there. He wanted to be the first person that I saw. And he was worried. He probably would, but he also wanted to be the first one to be like, you motherfucker, like, to get up on my ass.
Do what a dad should do, man.
And it's like, you hit all these walls, and they're still there, and they're still there. And you got to, kids, as it's like, they test you, and they continue to test you. And
they need to know where those boundaries are, man.
And you don't find them out. So you
hit
push. But, like, I think with the acting thing, there was this woman, this first teacher I had, who ended up marrying my wife and I, who really saved my life with this acting thing. I got in big trouble, and she sort of discovered in it that it was for me. Right. And she was, it's a real, like, how an adult who believes in you, or a teacher who believes in you, or a coach who believes in you, can change 100%. Everything. This woman, without a doubt, her name's Alma Becker. She's passed now. I got her name right here. Yeah. But she really saved my life. She's the one who led me to Moscow, to I lived in Moscow for a couple of years. That's where I studied it. And she had me approach it with the reverence and respect that I would if I was playing big time sports, if I was a fighter. I imagine that if I went the military route, it was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to outwork everybody. I'm going to, this saved my life. So I'm
give my life to it.
I'm going to give my life to it. Exactly. And so that's, but I do find that, like, in the sort of, like, acting world, like, there's every stereotype you can imagine is true, and fucking then some, right?
But I've been hanging out.
I do find that, especially folks that have, this might sound fucked up, but I found a little bit of success from it. And I wonder if it's the same sort of in the military and in the protection industry. the folks who really find success for, I found, they've done their work, they've done their training, they're incredibly committed, they're hardworking. Like, that goes without saying. But there are also folks who come at it from a completely different angle. They're not people who like wanted to be artists their whole life or subscribe to a lot of that. They're very much individuals. They very much have their own mentality. They don't think. They don't sort of like fall prey to groupthink and like, okay, politically or socially or culturally, this is what everyone thinks, so I gotta get. They're sort of like, they got an openness because they found something. The theater world,
they
and
have a foundation that was established before the success that ends up becoming an identity for someone if they don't already have a foundation.
Yes, sir.
Those are my favorite kind of people, man.
Yes, sir.
Especially with what I deal with, high net worth folks and all that stuff. One of the biggest problems I see is raising good kids while you already have so much.
Dude.
Dad probably had to earn his trash, get his stripes, fight to create the empire. And then the son's born into the empire, and dad's facing an equation of how do I run the empire and still raise a decent human? You know what I mean? Well,
when that hunger and that
you got to get that hunger into them.
Yeah. Right. If you did, like, that's what fueled you and got you to where you go. So do you have an example, or have you ever seen somebody who's been able to manage that well and do that right? And what did they do?
Yeah, no, that's huge, man. One of the things you touched on too that I wanted to illuminate too was just the influence of a good person in a young person's like life. For me, I was a young man. I'm a warrior. I've been a warrior my whole life. So like coming up, like I'm one stroke away from being a criminal. Fortunately, got into the Marine Corps. Had a Coach McKay, Darren McKay, who was, I think he was retired FBI, who was our football coach, man. And he was like, look, you can be a loser, you can do drugs, you can do all this stuff, but I'm not going to start you, and you're not going to go anywhere. And that kept the rails on all through high school. Yeah. And that one guy, me being a black dude, we don't have dads. It's kind of a cultural thing. I can say that. Yeah. No, but yeah, man. So, Pops is overseas and he's awesome. He's a hardcore dude. I still might not be able to beat him up. Like he's a, so for me, knowing that I came from that, I was looking for like a lane to still be a warrior. I've always known I was a warrior. And I found that in football, and Coach McKay, he gave me kind of that honor. Like, it's an honor to be good at this. This is how you work with a team. You guys are going to war. And that really, as a young man, I think there's equations we have to solve, like I think the first part of our life is about physical development, where I was talking earlier about like just developing into being a good man. Like, they were like, where does that come from? And I think one of the biggest things is become powerful first, become confident first, become competent in your physical body first. And if you think about it, there's so many good characteristics that come out of a human when he's putting himself in that physical pain and he's subjecting himself, submitting to that process. He's willing to be a fool, walk in the weight room and only pick up the 10-pounders for a little while.
That's right.
And it's humbling.
Everyone's been there. Yeah.
100%. And
walking in the gym, know everybody can whoop your ass.
Man. Yeah, 100%. You're going to get choked out for the next 9 months straight, bro. You know what I mean?
And that doesn't discriminate. You could be rich, poor, black, white. It does not matter.
How you walk in there.
You will get humbled.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I think it's so healthy. So one of the things I was telling my team is like, become strong first, because it's not just about the physical, it's the mental, it's the emotional, all those things are going to be strengthened and you're going to need those things. And then you move into the second phase of life, where I was sitting at the Eiffel Tower on a protection detail with a bunch of dudes. I was probably the least lethal guy there. So I got like a bunch of special forces dudes, one of the most world-renowned powerlifters, Konstantin Konstantinov, rest his soul. He's like Ivan Drago's like big ugly brother that couldn't make it, into the movies. But he's a savage. People know who he is, and he's like my big brother in this game. And we're sitting there, and we order lunch, and a Coca-Cola was like $20. Yeah. And I remember I was making good money. I'm at the tip of the spear, top of the protection game. And I remember being like, well, geez, man, like this $20, like for a Coca-Cola, like what's this Coke gonna do for me? Like, is it gonna take me, is it gonna take me on a date after this? Like, what's going on? And But, my Heavenly Father came to me and was like, why are you tripping? You're making good money. What's going on? And I was just kind of like, well, I'm having this internal dialogue. And I was like, there's a lot of money for a Coke. And he's like, well, you're making good money. And I was like, yeah, but like things are still tight. And he kind of showed me in that moment, what have you devoted your life to? Right. And your gift will make room before kings. Your gift will make room for you before kings. That's what the Bible says. And my gift was physical strength.
And this was right after the first quarter of my life. And I was kind of like, well, my physical strength has taken me as far as it can take me. But if one of us gets whacked tonight on this operation, I can be replaced within 24 hours. You know, we can be, the next tough guy moves into my slot. I was like, well, who has actual power? Well, like the little 150-pound client that's at the Ritz-Carlton right now taking a nap while we're out working, you know, doing advanced work on everything. That guy's got power. And then that's when, as a young man, I kind of was like, okay, how can I get power? And then I started to look at building my intellect and building the value I can bring to a team and bring to people on that level. And so I stopped focusing as much on my physical, and I started focusing on intellectual discipline and development. And that's where my life really started to change.
And you feel, and you acknowledge, you're acutely aware that you can't get one without the other, that you have to go to this place first.
You can't, I don't think you can really have one without the other. And really the lesson was, there's a massive difference between strength and power. Strength, something happens in this room, me and you are going to have a say about it. Someone walks through that door with a gun, me and you are going to have a say about what the outcome is.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
We can dominate an environment, but if we really want to have power and influence, we have to develop our soul, the mind, will, and emotions. And that was a huge realization for me. But I've also noticed that people that I find, like a lot of the intellectuals and a lot of the politicians and people I find that have just focused on the intellectual and all these other aspects, and I notice they don't have calluses on their hands, and they've been around the block. There's something missing there. I don't even know if I can trust them. Like, I don't even know if I have friends that, you know what I mean?
What's interesting, like, because it's so interesting, man, and because like I feel like they know it, you know. Like,
they
I feel like
feel it.
You know, like
you have all the money in the world, but if you ain't got a foundation,
that's
you know?
right. And it's like, you know, people who, you know, and I want to get into. I'm obviously this is not what I do for a living, and I'm not the best in terms of like, because I want to introduce you properly, and I want you to kind of introduce yourself.
No worries, man.
But like, just because we're just saying stuff that really resonates with me. You know, I've often said, and it goes into child rearing, it goes into sort of how you define and practice in your own life. But I really believe that every man and woman has their own relationship with violence. Like they have, like, and that can be that you've had like no experience with it, or you've had so much experience with it. It's colored you at a young age. It's been this toxic, horrible environment. It's been this thing where you've studied it and say, but never been able to practice. Like, everybody has their own brand. And I think it brings in, you know, I know
super
with me,
important.
it's super. I know with me, like when I think about like my journey that way, how it like kind of starts with shame, how like you're backing down from things, you're getting beat up all the time, or you're not, like, very few people just kind of walk into the earth and just are like, you know, like
which ends up being a vulnerability, because
100%.
those guys start to think they're something they're not, and then they meet some guy that they size up incorrectly, and then they got to learn the lesson. They fall from grace,
there's always a bigger bear, man. And
man.
what I tell my kids all the time is like, you know, like really the talent, you know, like what you're naturally born with, that's a gift, and you should respect it, and you should be so grateful for it. But at the end of the day, it means nothing.
It's
all about time in the box, man. It's 100%. All about how much you've done. But I do find, you know, right now, like kind of culturally, there's this thing around sort of being able to protect yourself, whether it's, you know, physically with martial arts, with jujitsu, whatever it is, or with firearms or self-protection or whatever. That can be such a beautiful thing if it comes from a place of humility, of experience. But I think some folks, like you said, you know, this power kind of without that, it can leave them in such a kind of naked and
it can make them more vulnerable. Like,
absolutely,
power without purpose is a problem, right? And I think a lot of masculine development, especially, you're going to start getting power. You're going to start realizing you're stronger than your mom. Like, even if you just, once the T levels, the testosterone levels start kicking up and stuff, you're going to start realizing like, hey, I kind of, you know, I have some capabilities that a lot of humans around me don't have. And I think answering that equation for people, I think the real epidemic in the world is weak men, is males that never transition from going from being a dependent into being dependable. And I think that's a lot of what masculinity is about. I think it's a journey. It's not a destination. Yeah, like I was in Iraq, and yeah, you know, I've done all kinds of things all over the world, but you know, I have to make sure that I'm staying on the journey of developing. I can only take the people who are dependent on me and who are behind me as far as I've gone myself. And so I'm constantly pushing. But like on that whole kind of masculine development thing, I think one of the biggest phantoms and pitfalls for people now is being like, all right, well, let me get jacked and tan, let me learn some jujitsu, the beautiful thing about martial arts is it starts to teach you the discipline that should come with the tools. But I think the biggest question for guys to realize is the secret, like, is the most fulfilling aspect of this equation is if you acquire power and you start to realize that is to render the highest level of service possible, you become a king.
There you go.
Yeah. All that power that you need to acquire in order to be a righteous leader. When I say righteous, I mean in right standing, where the people behind you organically want to follow you, not just because your rank or your position. When you start to realize that it's about service, that's when you start to live the most fulfilling life possible.
I love that, man. If you take like the CEO that you're protecting, and then you take the guy on the detail. Yeah. This guy could kick through walls and he can do whatever comes in, but this guy can lead. Like, do you feel like you're equally naked if you haven't at least attempted or dedicated your life to trying to foster and nurture both? I think
that it is a very interesting balance, because what I find is, like, the guys like me, wise men wonder while strong men die, right? It's that whole strength versus power thing. When you're, a juggernaut and you're on one of these details, the VIP is really powerful, but if they're not comfortable with themselves, it's almost like you can tell that people that may have means or influence or financial, potency, it gets back into violence, I think, because there's a certain level of, like, that scene in Batman when the business bad guy comes into the room with Bane, and Bane's standing there and he's like, I gave you a small fortune, and Bane's like, do you feel in charge? Like, because there's a reality. There's a reality.
That's some shit we could take away. Like, that shit can be just stripped away in a heartbeat.
You might have means, but then there's this physical reality that in a room,
only one of us is getting out.
Exactly. At any moment, I can take this, and I can take a room hostage if I want to.
Right.
But at the same time, these guys that just have physical means are servants, right? Like in EP, we're there to serve. We're there to support. And your financial life and your life might look as weak as that man might physically be. And while you still do have this asset of strength, in the world, in the matrix we live in right now, it is just as, if not more important in some ways, to have that financial potency to a point where you can now protect and provide and give homeostasis and stability to your family.
For sure.
And so understanding that you as a man, it's very simple. You must have all things. It's not simple. I'm completely messing with you. You got to solve all these equations. And then the ultimate and the highest equation is also spiritual development.
That's right.
Because the good Lord puts you in a situation that's going to push you and challenge you on so many levels that if you're really going to become all you're designed to be in this life, homie, like, I am 100% convinced that you need to constantly be surpassing yourself, and you will be challenged with things that are greater than you, that are harder than you. You're going to have to fight when there's no daylight, when you don't know how you're going to get out of the financial situation, the relational situation, and you can't strongman through all those things. Right. And you're going to need spiritual development at a certain point, especially when you get older and your identities start shifting and your physical body isn't what it used to be.
For sure.
Like there's a third level, I think, which is the final level, which is that spiritual development. But to answer that question more directly, I think the healthiest guy is the guy that can do both, man. When I see a successful business guy who's also on the mats, who's also got he's fit, like, I'm like, that guy has it. That guy did it, man. And he can look any man in the eyes.
That's right.
And be 100% comfortable.
That's right. And I think, and understand, one of the things that you said I love so much is, like, there's this idea to it that none of this is a destination, right? Like, none of this is like, I've arrived, I've got this licked. I mean, anything in life that's really worth its salt is something that you'll never have licked.
It's always evolving.
You're always going to fail at, always going to be somebody better, always going to be so. But that then leaves you hungry to say, hey, I can learn from this cat. Like, hey, this guy's doing something. Oh, cool. Mm-hmm. And you're not constantly going, I'm better than him. Yeah. I know more. I got more money than him. I could beat his ass. Like, that's crippling thought, right? Yeah. And, like, I think about with my kids, in terms of, because I don't know, like, I love talking shit, and I love sort of acting like I have the answers sometimes. But the truth is,
we're all making this.
Like,
we're building the parachute on the way down, bro.
And like, it's what I love about parenthood. It's like, you are gonna fail and fail and fail and fail. Like you say, oh shit, I just see some shit in my kid. Yeah. It's my weakness. That's gonna be a bumpy ride. Like, I got to try to fit. And like, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Yep. But it's the pursuit, the full-throated, full-hearted pursuit of saying, hey, I'm trying to develop these things, and I'm on this, and I'm humble, and I can learn. I think that's important. I try to tell my kids all the time, don't put a ton of stock in stuff that can be taken away from you,
100%.
you know, like in a heartbeat. And that,
Yeah.
so what I'm talking about, the talking shit and acting like I know stuff, I think I have my own feelings about what's more important, because at the end of the day, you've got Bane and you've got the businessman. You know what I mean? We can take that money away, right?
100%. Like, so it might be going away here in a few months, and like we might have to figure some things out.
For sure.
You know, value and equity might switch.
For sure. Yeah. But I think like you can be left equally naked if you double down everything you have on this one, because what can be your strength, I think you said this, can also be your crutch and leave you crippled. Because if what it is you're constantly going around being like, I'm the strongest, toughest, baddest dude in the world. Number one, you're wrong.
Yeah, you're wrong.
Number two, like you stop learning, you stop thinking,
you're one dimensional too.
Yeah, you're one dimensional. No. And so let me, that might be a
that was
good
a
time.
great rabbit hole. We could kick it in here for a minute.
For sure. But like, how would you, you know, I heard when you were sort of describing yourself, like, you know, that you're a warrior, right? And like, you know, like, you know, we've been kind of in each other's orbit for quite a while. We never actually met, and I'm really grateful for you.
Actually, I saw you at an event a while.
Which one? In South Carolina?
No, I was doing a fundraiser. It was like a bowling fundraiser type of thing. Snoop Dogg was there. Will Smith was there, and you popped in.
Nah.
And you were a couple other clients.
I met Snoop once.
Really?
And it was a huge deal.
Was he supposed to be? Yeah, and I remember you came in for a little bit. I think you had your kids.
And did we say what's up to each other?
Yeah, like just a quick, like, yo, what? And we kept flowing, and
fuck, dude.
And it was just one
boxing
random
and
night.
marijuana, bro. It is got to be the death of me,
Let's
dude.
go.
Really? What? And it was a Will Smith thing?
He was there. He was for sure there.
Yeah.
And
all right.
We were all
well, shit, man.
For a minute,
well,
I was in the shadows though. I was working.
Okay, you were working. Fair enough.
You guys were doing your thing, and I was just like, you know, we bumped into each other, you know, on the way to the hot dog line or something.
Fair enough. Okay, that's what.
But I do want to get back to that question about parenting and raising kids. When you
we're definitely gonna go into that. I wanted to see, like, if you could, just for some context. I heard you say you're a warrior.
Yeah.
And I know people that I really, really respect in the SF community, and people who just in sort of like general kind of, you've kept my family safe before from a distance. Yeah. I'm incredibly indebted to you for that. And people that I respect and like really know sort of the darkness of this world all sort of talk about you as sort of you're in a league of your own in this, and in your knowledge and your capabilities. How would you sort of describe, I'm always interested in how we describe ourselves. Yeah. How would you, like, if you would tell the world, okay, like how would you say kind of who you are?
How would I describe Byron? Yeah. So I would say I'm acutely aware of my humanity and vulnerability, right? So we're talking about the gym, we're talking about training, shooting, fighting, all these things. You know, for me, those are daily disciplines, because I know that, like, on the scale of 1 to 10 of juggernauts, I'm like a 5.5, a 6. You know, I'm acutely aware that in war and in combat, the best warrior does not always win. And so my strength, you know, has been really the grace of God in my life, but also a work ethic that's like, hey, dude, I'm just a chubby little black kid, mama's boy, who's kind of by himself in the world, I got Jesus and my hard work. And so I am always trying to better my best. So I'm killing Byron every single day on the altar of progress to become a better Byron in order to serve, man. Like everything that I've created, for me, you know, when I say your gift will make room for you before kings, for me, the entire game is about bringing my God glory. I want people to look at me and be like, golly, like, how could one imperfect man do so much awesomeness on this planet? Because, you know, we'll maybe get into my story more, but like, I shouldn't be here. I should have died in Iraq. I got blown up 5 times. I got hit with 60 plus pounds of homemade explosives directly. You know, I had snipers shoot at me and miss. You know, I was standing on top of 215 anti-tank shells. And I fortunately, by the grace of God, you know, I heard the Holy Spirit told me what to do. And I realized, like, I've just had so many instances, like, I don't get to think anymore. 2 things come out of that. I don't get to think anymore that, like, any of this has to do with the fact that I'm so cool or I'm this good. I know that I'm here for a reason. It doesn't take a lot of faith for me to believe in God anymore, because he's just come through for me so much. I get to also know that my edge is how hard I work.
I wake up every single morning at 4 a.m. I go to bed at 11 or later. She watches it every single day because I got a second chance at life. I had an out of body experience. I prayed for another chance. I promised to God that I was going to go as hard as I could in the paint. Literally, that's what I said. That was my my vernacular at the time. I was like, yo, I swear if you send me back, I'll go so hard in the paint, man. I'll make it worth it, Yeah. I swear I ain't going to do this again, So, and he put me back in my body and gave me another shot. So for me, I'm at war every single day to become the best version of myself and make the best contributions I can, because the way I can serve the world is really what I'm after. And outside of that, I look at myself as, I'm trying to be as good of a man of God as I can be, acutely aware of my imperfections. I'm all about my loyalty there, then my loyalty to my mission. Through my mission, I serve my family and I serve my tribe and I serve the world. And it's not about how good I am. It's about how good the contributions I can make. And part of that is how much I can develop myself. So that's really what it's about, man. And I've gone hard, like the Marine Corps, we went hard, sleeping 2 to 3 hours a night in Iraq for multiple, months at a time, like best education I could ever got. So now when it comes to my businesses, when it comes to protection work, like I know how to go hard. And so I go really, really hard. And that like for anyone listening that is like, hey, I'm just some dude like that, I don't think I could ever be anything. I'm here to tell you, like, it doesn't have to do with how cool you are. Like I have a few 100,000 followers, and to a lot of people that's a lot. But like when I started out, I had to look in the mirror and be just blatantly honest with myself and be like, who wants to follow you, bro? Like, what value are you giving people? Like you're not, if I was a Navy SEAL, I could be like, Navy SEAL coffee and like start selling God, people would buy it, like, cause they've done so much and they're cool and people love it. But like, I'm just a grunt, I've been to war a few times and I had to get real. Hey, no one's going to pay attention to you unless you can actually help their lives get better. How are you going to help their lives get better? You better invest in yourself so that you have some value to give to the world. And when you start giving value to the world, people start paying attention to you. Otherwise, you'll die tired and you'll die hungry, and that'll be righteous. Because to him who has, more will be given, and to him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And that's what Jesus said, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's the way this world works, man. And so I'm on a mission to fight a war of contribution by the grace of God.
Well, it's beautiful, man.
I'm a long answer, guy. Sorry. At any moment you can like cease fire.
Trust me, brother.
Look at the wire.
I'm the same way, dude. I love it. No, it's great. And I think, it's like, I'm always interested by how people answer that question, right? Because it's, it's like, are you asking about my career? Are you asking about my accomplishments? Are you asking about some folks, my failures? Are you asking, like, what are you asking me? And where you went is your purpose, sort of like your spiritual bent, like, service. You start with humility, and for everyone, sort of career wise, can you tell us sort of what you do? And maybe it's the same answer. Maybe you just say, fuck it, this is gonna be the shortest answer. I just said it, motherfucker. But like, what sort of, where have you been, and what do you sort of do now? Whether you want to talk about entrepreneurially or in protection, whatever that is, just so people have some context.
Yeah. So I'm a warrior, right? And my mission, I, as a young man, I always ask God, like, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Because one of the things I struggled with, my father's an extremely masculine guy. Like, you think like Donald Trump mixed with Tony Montana in the body of like I still might not be able to beat him up. He's a savage, right? Mm-hmm. I still might have to shoot him if we had to get like, it's one of those. He got shot at point blank range with a shotgun, survived. He's a fighter, which, came into play when I was in my near-death experience. I heard his voice. But for me, I always was like, I'm a warrior. How can this be a good thing? Because, all the other men I met in church were just kind of soft, and I remember looking at God and being like, I don't, like, these seem like nice guys, but like, like I could learn about Jesus, but like, I need to figure out how to make my warriorhood serve in a good way.
What age were you when you start? Like, what?
This was like growing up with my mom when I was little. When I was in the Bahamas until 5. So I'm from the Bahamas, born in the Bahamas. I was in the Bahamas till like 5, and on the island, you're fighting all the time.
What's that? Tell me about growing up in the Bahamas, man.
Yeah, man, growing up in the Bahamas. Okay, so if you can't swim
or dance or fight, you'll be a virgin forever. But it's old school. You walk in the room, you don't say good morning, you're gonna get snatched up. Someone will beat you, give you to your parents. Your parents will beat you. So it's super old school.
I was just in the Bahamas last year, and I met so many amazing
like good people,
and the dudes that like
real dudes,
real motherfucker. And it's that same thing. It's like that such
honor,
high levels of respect and honor, but you could tell that like they're about it. And
dangerous
they gave me the idea,
polite society,
straight up. and right, and like when you would go, anyhow, they told me about like watermen and like what it means to be like a real waterman.
That's a culture.
And I
man.
couldn't, but like the things that people can do in the water there.
Yeah, it's like supernatural.
Insane. It's supernatural. Yeah, tell me more, man.
So growing up there was good because I got that whole culture of respect, of honor, and of merit. Really, like if you weren't that fast, like they talk crap to you. Hey, fat boy! I got called fat boy. So then what ended up happening was I would go. My parents split up, and then I go live with my mom during the winters and school and all that. And then I go back to the Bahamas.
Where was that?
During the summers. My mom was in Washington State.
Got it.
So I go up there, live with my mom and everything. Then I come back to the Bahamas and everyone's like, oh, it's American, you soft. You know what I'm saying? I had to earn my stripes like every single summer, So it was really cool to get both cultures. And that's kind of when I started being like, man, I'm definitely different. My dad's a warrior. There's something that definitely gets passed biologically, like my dad didn't necessarily raise me. When I go back to the Bahamas, he was so busy working on his empire. He was one of the most successful businessmen in the Bahamas growing up. He was in magazines and stuff like that, but he was hammering. Same way I hammer, right? And it's really interesting to see the similarities between me and him without me having been necessarily raised by him. It's weird, right? So he'll start preaching to me the stuff I preach to my family, and I'm like, how did this happen? So that's an interesting thing. Nature, nurture, somewhere in between.
Sure.
And so I would bounce back and forth. And then, as I grew up, I was kind of like, I got to find a good outlet for this warriorhood. And I found that in football first, played 6A football, Gig Harbor High School. I think we were like the first or second best weight training program in the state of Washington. Ran into a choice point where I was like, well, do I want to go play football and like try to get a scholarship and go down that road? I was the team captain and all that stuff. Or what else is there? And for me, I ran into the equation of how can I achieve my and answer the question of me being a man without and one in a way that's going to impress my dad. And my dad's one of those guys, like, Dad, I found the cure for cancer. He's like, cancer? Just cancer?
Yeah.
Go back in the room, figure out AIDS and multiple sclerosis. Get back,
Soft ass.
Get it. Yeah, exactly. If you ain't done by tomorrow morning, we gonna have it,
So
So I was like, what can I do? And it was like, hey, there's a war going on. And I was like, I'm gonna go to war and I'm gonna earn my trash in such a way that no one can take it from me. You weren't there with me in war, and I'm gonna settle this for myself. I'm gonna go fight grown men to the death at age 18. There's a war going on. I'm an able-bodied man. This is my responsibility.
As part of that's something that your pops never did.
Oh yeah, no. And my pops never did it. He started the first like private sector tactical team, special response team in the Bahamas, but never went to war. So that was kind of like going to be my edge. And now we were talking about the things we put our parents through, right? So I tell them, I graduate. My dad comes down for my high school graduation, and I'm like, my mom's sitting there on the bed with my dad, and we're in this hotel room, and she's like, okay, so what's next, Byron? Now, mind you, I got in some trouble in high school, like all like masculine dudes do. And I get sent to live with my grandma, so I'm banished. So I do the end of high school with grandma. And then I'm like, hey, I'm going to the Marine Corps and I'm going to go fight in this war. And then they're going to give me a scholarship for school and I'll figure it out after that, and my mom's like, that's great. Okay, so pack your stuff. You're going with your dad to the Bahamas. You're going to learn business. And which was clearly the smartest thing for me to do. My dad's got an empire in the Bahamas. I learned business, like my whole life looks different. And I just remember in that moment being like, yo, they didn't even listen to a stinking word I said. Yeah. And, I thought I was the man at that point. Me and my mom had already kind of broke contact. Like mom was like really hyper spiritual, hyper Christian, super disciplinarian. I was a very respectful kid. But like still waters run deep. Like I was like, the second I get out of this house, man, I ain't turning back. And then finally my mom like tried to, like,
I guess, ground me one weekend, and I was like, Mom, I'm 18. I'm not grounded. And if you have a problem with it, I'll go to the Marine Corps and I'm just never going to talk to you again. and that was kind of like a moment where I like kind of just was like, all right, I'm just on my own. I'm good with it. You know, for better or for worse. I don't suggest doing anything like that. But then next thing you know, so I'm like, okay, they're not listening to me. So I get ready to walk out of the room. I blink. I'm through the back sliding glass window of the hotel room, dangling off the balcony.
Because they were like, you're not
like,
going.
in my house, we old school. You know,
Yeah.
you don't even smell like disrespect. You think a disrespectful thought. You know what I'm saying? And like somebody's catching you. You wake up across the room. So I wake up, and now my dad's dangling me off the balcony. Like, now that I have kids, I completely understand. Like, I can't believe I put them through this now. You know what I mean? And so I'm sitting here. And I remember like looking back at him, and I'm dangling off the balcony, and I remember being like, well, you know, just relaxing. And Pops was like, why aren't you afraid? You know, because he felt me just relax, you know, and he's like, why aren't you afraid? And
so he hangs you over the side of the balcony.
Yes. And I'm sitting here, he's holding me like this, and I'm like upside down looking like up over my feet back at Dad, you know. And I was like, because either you're going to drop me off the balcony or I'm going to go join the Marine Corps. And he looks away for a second. He looks back at me. He pulls me up, and he said, "Okay, you know, you're a man. I respect you." He's like, "You got to make your own decisions." He's like, "But don't die out there." And I said, "I'll do my best. Pray for me." And then I left, and I went to war. You know.
Did he have respect for that?
Yeah, he did. He did. He had
felt
respect. He came to my graduation, and it was a very defining moment. That moment came back to haunt me, though, after I got rocked by 60 some odd pounds of explosives and realized that I was dead. You know, there was a moment where I was like, man, I'm a pile of guts on the floor in Iraq. I failed. I died, and I started apologizing to my family. That moment came back. We get into that. And then, you know, fortunately I got to come back. But so then from there, I mean, kind of into who Byron is. So from there, I go to war, 3-1, Lima Company, weapons platoon. For all the trolls out there, you guys can look me up, 04, 08. Get out of boot camp right after Fallujah, the Battle of Fallujah. Thought I missed the most glorious combat engagement in the world. Thought it was over for me. We still got out there. We still got after it. Did my time in the Marine Corps, 2 deployments, and then I got, by the grace of God, into executive protection. Which is another crazy story. It's one of the 4 times I ever heard God's voice. When people say, you didn't choose the game, I didn't choose the game chose me. It was really like that. You know, I was getting out of the Marine Corps. I was scared. And I was like, man, all I know how to do is hold a gun. And what am I going to do, Father? Like, what am I going to do? And he was like, go to Hennessy's Tavern in Dana Point, become a bouncer. You're going to become a bodyguard. You're going to travel the world. And I was like, okay. And I was so excited. I came out into the living room, and I've never I don't really hear his voice that clearly. I heard his voice clearly. I walked out into the living room.
Had you been to Hennessy's Tavern? I mean,
I've been around. Yeah, I've been around. You know, it's one of my spots. One of my spots. You know, all the other Marines went to Oceanside. I went to, I just tried to find a different spot. Anyway, so I go there. I get the job. 3 months later, randomly, not so randomly, my buddy Luke Agajanian, who I'm still boys with to this day, looks at me and he says, hey, have him do it. Calls me over to the table, and I'm like, hey, what do you guys need? And they're like, you got combat experience? I'm like, yeah. They're like, you getting out of the Marine Corps? I'm like, yeah. They're like, go get these 2 permits. Give me a call back in 2 weeks. I'm gonna show you how to make a lot more money doing what you're doing. And it's funny because when I was praying, asking for guidance, I walk into the living room. My girlfriend at the time is like, she's like, what are you so happy about? I'm like, I know exactly what's going to happen. And she's like, well, what's going to happen? And I tell her, I'm going to go become a bouncer, and I'm going to become a bodyguard out at Hennessy's Tavern. I'm going to travel the world. She's laughing in my face. She's like, yeah, right. 1, you can't become a bouncer, because she knew that'd be the end of our relationship. And she was right. And then 2, she was just like, you're crazy. And I'm like, I'm not crazy. I know this voice that kept me alive in Iraq. I know exactly what's going to happen. And I said, when it happens, all I ask is that you believe. And legit, 3 months later, I get recruited onto the biggest international executive protection detail at age 21, right? It's like getting recruited from flag football into the NFL at age 21. And we start clipping off. That first year, we did 60 plus countries for that detail. And that was the beginning of my career, starting at one of the highest levels in the game. And I was with that client for 7 years, just rolling at that pace. So I grew up in the industry in dog years, right? So for protection work like I do, some guys might do like side work. Like, yeah, I do EP. It's kind of like saying I'm a musician and you play at like the local bar every Thursday or Friday, right?
Sure.
But like to be doing full-time international work back then, especially when the industry was underdeveloped, was huge. And so I grew up in dog years, man, in this game. And then from there, I broke away from that detail. Went down to Florida to work with my dad and try to start a security company with my dad and do different things down there. Ended up building my whole kind of resume up again, getting up into the higher levels of EP on the East Coast. So I built my career from either coast, and then finally got a call from a big client back out in Cali, moved back to Cali, started my company in 2017. And so now, I drag and drop teams all over the world, as you saw, and service a lot of high net worth individuals and things like that. The other aspects of my company, I have a book that I've published called Finding Meaning After the Military, which is all about, that transition for veterans or anyone going through transition on how to really achieve success in the 1st Civilian Division. And that's all the tools that I used. And then I have the Protector Nation, where I teach civilians protection strategies and tactics. And it's not so much all about being physical. We have 70 hours of content online that'll teach people, behavioral profiling, the reality of situational awareness, like you name it, selecting your first firearm, how to get good with firearms. So stuff like that. And then I have one of the premier training organizations for executive protection professionals in the world as well. So that's the League of Executive Protection Specialists, where we take vets or civilians or whoever that is. Hold on, let me just. My ringer's never on. I don't know how that happened.
Oh, you're good.
Anyway, so we train.
Maybe that was the bat phone. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, sorry about that. It was actually my
good,
ringer
bro.
was off. That's interesting. So we train guys on how to get into this industry. And so for me, my ethos is I'm a protector. I'm here to multiply protectors in the world. Protectors, the white blood cells in the body of humanity, and so I believe if I can make more protectors, we're all gonna live safer lives.
Tell me a little bit more. Like, tell me a little bit more about your pops, man. Like, just tell me what it's like to grow up. I'm interested in all that. Like going back to Bahamas, going back and forth. I'm really interested. Not to harp on it, but again, about like, are you pretty good in the water?
Yeah, I actually am.
Yeah.
And I didn't know African Americans didn't swim until I got to the Marine Corps. And we're getting ready to go to the tank, the dunk tank, the drown tank, whatever you want to call it. And my whole platoon's like, yo, we're going to watch Rodgers drown today. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Yeah. They're like, dark green Marines can't swim. And I'm like, guys. I grew up swimming. I can swim better than every single one of you. Yeah. And they're like, yeah,
because
right.
Like you're dealing with like crazy fucking storms, like boatmen and watermen. Like it's just, and that's what they said. They're like, if you don't know how to do that, you just get clowned out there.
Oh yeah.
Like what are those, like, what's that like? Like, what are those storms like? Like what is that? What is that
life?
Do? Yeah.
Yeah, so like I grew up spearfishing. I mean, I'm like 7 years old, home alone. Pops is at work, and I'm literally like, I'm finna go catch some fish. And I got my spear, and I'm hopping in the water, and I got a little dinghy boat with a little electric engine.
Crazy.
And for me now, thinking about a little like 7-year-old, I'm in the ocean, jumping off the side, spearing fish, throwing them in the boat.
What does that tell you about like the capability of what
a little
humans
dude,
and what kids can fucking do? It's crazy, right?
Like the Spartans were a bunch of teenagers, bro.
That's right. That's right.
And so, massive, and it really did instill a lot of independence in me and a lot of self-reliance. And like, the time I would have out there was just me and God and the water, and I remember being in storms and like, even when we go to the beach, like I'd go to the break line, like the water break, and I would just let it throw me under and just like toss me around. And I would kind of learn how to just relax in the chaos.
And was that something that somebody told you to do, or was that
just kind of like what I love to do?
What's the worst? What's the worst that you've seen? Because like for me, man, like I grew up in DC. Like my kids surfs, my wife surfs. Like I really like I am not like I love being out there, but I'm wide eyed, dude. Like the whole time. Like
it's creepy.
Like what's the I mean, and it's so humbling, right? And like you said, there's already some. It doesn't matter how good you are. Like that shit. Like I'm sure people who have I'm sure you've known people that have died at sea or where the water has gotten them, right?
Well, usually it's the tourists that get sucked out by like an undertow or they're not familiar with what to look for in the water and how to read the water. I did get drowned. I did drown once.
What was that?
So my sister, my big sister from Buffalo, New York, my dad's got 7 wives. We got a lot of kids. It's a black thing. Yes. Yeah, no, anyway. So my sister, one of them, Bianca, she was panicking, and I tried to go out and swim and save her and bring her back. And I don't really remember it, but I had to get resuscitated and all kinds of things like that.
How old were you?
I had to have been kind of that same, like 5, 6, 7, maybe 8. And, that was probably, I know that did instill some trauma in me, because I remember the next time, totally remember the next time we're trying to come into the house. We had a big water wall where all the waves would break. So you had to get it right. You had to like thread the needle, make sure, and there's like a little door in between this big water wall, and these waves are hitting it. So you had to kind of like time it right, get off the boat right, swim a little bit, get up there, not get crushed on the rocks, not get slammed into the
water wall is rocks where waves are crashing into.
Yeah, exactly. It's this massive wall that you just get crushed against if you don't get it right.
Yeah.
And she starts panicking and flips the boat, and I'm like, dude, this chick's gonna drown me again. And I just remember being like, nah. And I like kind of tried to help her. She's like, panicking, but not dying, but panicking. And I remember she grabbed me, dude, and I just dove. I was like, nope. And I just swam straight down. And I was like, nah, you gonna learn today, girl.
Wow.
Swam out, and I'm standing next to my dad. Dad's yelling at her, telling her to figure it out. And he makes her swim in. My dad was a savage. I remember one of the times I got beat up out there on the water, the tide was coming in. There's a big reef between home and, like the ocean, and the raft starts getting thrown against all the rocks. And I'm like, this thing's going to pop. So I ditch it and I fight my way back, back to the shoreline. And I go to, I barely survive. I get in the house. I'm like, Dad, like I made it. Like I'm thinking he'd be happy. And he's like, son, where's your boat? And I'm like, no, he's not going to make me do this. Yeah. And he's like, I'm like, it's out there. Like it was horrible. And I'm trying to tell him, he's like, get back out there and get your boat. And I'm like, I remember being like, you don't care about me? Like, you just gonna let me die out there? Yeah. And I remember walking out there and getting in that water, dude. And I swam out there and I fought my way through the surf line. I fought my way to get the boat. And I'm a little dude. I'm maybe like 8, 9, maybe by this time. And I grabbed that thing and I remember just towing it in, and it's just getting, and I'm coming up and fighting. But it made, these are the things that really made me a man. The other time I remember we were at Wet and Wild back in the day, and they were in the, the wave pool, and it was like crowded, and I remember he was like, come on, son, or something. And I didn't keep up. And they went all the way to the back wall. And I just remember being like, there's no way I can get to them. And all I see is my dad in the very back being like, son, you better get out here. And, Dad says it, you're going to die if you don't do it. Yeah. So I fought my way through. And I remember swimming through so many people, going under, trying to, and fighting my way out there. And that I think those types of things my dad did for me, that is a masculine form of love that's not very much recognized these days.
Totally.
That helps your boys develop self-reliance, develop into a man. I remember one day he wanted a hot dog, and all I had to do was walk out to the street corner, maybe a quarter mile down, and to the left was where the hot dog stand was. But in the Bahamas, there's dog gangs, right? And if you've been to third world country, there's these dog gangs, right? And they're pulling motorcyclists off bikes, halfway eating them. You run them over with a car, they barrel roll and they get back up. You know what I mean? And I remember there's this 2 dog gangs between me and these hot dogs, and I remember being like, Dad, like these dogs are the size of me. These things are going to kill me. And he's like, go get me a hot dog. So, and I remember being like, don't you know? And you can't complain.
Yeah.
And what happened? I went out there and I freaking grabbed a stick, man. And I was ready to fight those dogs,
Yeah.
And that stuff made me into a man, so that when I got challenged, I wasn't a knight in shining armor. When I was in boot camp, I wasn't a knight in shining armor whose metal had never been tested. I was able to be like, well, Father, like either I'm going to die, or we're going to freaking get this done. And that's just been my approach through my whole life.
I love that, man. I love that you say this, that kind of love, and
it's a love, it's a love language, man.
It is, man. And you're right. It's very much something that is not around, it's not like, it's even within homes. I think that there's a lot of moms, there's a lot of protection. Teacher who just say like, don't do that. And I think, and I know that the instinct so much. I mean, I even know for me, it's like you see your kid in a bad situation and you're like, oh, I'm going to go beat the shit. Like if that dog takes one step towards my kid,
Oh,
I'm
it's
going to go
gonna get
strike,
wrecked.
right?
Yeah,
And like,
yeah.
that's our instinct, right?
Yeah.
But like how great that your dad is like, here's a stick or
Yeah,
like, or just
yeah.
like, I don't give a fuck. Just give me the hot dog.
Yeah,
And
figure
it's
it out,
like
boy.
the fine line, like you were
Mm-hmm.
saying between sort of like apathy and like unbelievably sublime love. Like,
Yeah.
like I know that what this child needs more than anything else in the
Anything,
world is to go there and figure this the fuck out.
Yeah, and
you know?
I'm willing to sacrifice, and this is why I believe it's a higher form of love, is I'm willing to sacrifice his affection for me to give him what he needs in this moment, whether
That's
he
right.
recognizes it or not.
That's right.
And so it's really informed so much of my paradigm when I look at life. When I'm hit with challenges, I'm just like, Father, thank you. You know, like Father God, you put this in front of me to make me a better man. Like this ain't gonna get me again. And now what's gonna happen? Like for anyone listening, when you wake up and you're looking at a situation, you're like, how the heck am I gonna get through this? Or I can't believe I'm dealing with this. Yo, check it out. If you learn how to overcome that and you learn how to master that and or you just push through it and it doesn't kill you, you're being given a gift, the greatest gift you can, which is understanding what you're really capable of and or developing more capabilities. And that does not come from anything other than adversity. We hit the gym and we tear our muscles apart to get stronger. It's the same in life. So now when I'm facing these extremely sophisticated equations, instead of being like, I can't believe this is happening, what am I going to do? I sit there and I'm like, wow, man, I'm honored by my adversaries. I can tell the measure of a man by the measure of his problems. And I sit there and I'm like, wow, what an honor that I'm being given this level of problem. And when I get to the other side of this, man, like I'm going to be so much more dangerous, so much more intelligent. I'm going to be able to make I'm going to be able to make better deals. I'm going to be able to provide more jobs for my guys and a better quality of life that's much more robust and stable for my family. I'm going to be a much more honorable man once I solve this equation.
It's beautiful that you.
So I see it as love, man. It's all love, bro.
And that's great. And to have you know, when you look backwards, I think it's easy to sort of see. And it's another thing I try to say to my kids all the time, is that this problem, this thing that is it's an absolute gift. And and nothing good comes out of stuff that's not hard as fuck.
Yeah, man. Nothing will lead you closer to destruction than comfort, bro.
For sure. How do you deal then with confusion? Like, are you ever confused? Are you ever, shit, I don't know whether I should go this way or this way. If I go this way, it's going to do X, Y, and Z, potentially X way. Because, you know, I know for me, you know, when the complex things come in my life, it's not about, like, I know how to put my head down and grind through things. And I know how to, okay, this is going to be really fucking hard, but like, let's go, right? But then it's like, but if I do that, that's going to have me neglect this thing over here, which really needs me, or this thing over here, which really needs me and my attention. How do you deal with confusion and are you confused at times?
Yeah. So, you know, obviously as men and as leaders, we're always thinking about second, third line order effects on our tribes and everything like that. But when I'm faced with what I've learned is that your life moves and your vision becomes manifest into reality at the speed of execution. And so the velocity in which you can make decisions and the higher quality, you know, if you want a higher quality life, you have to make higher quality decisions. You want higher quality decisions, you have to get higher quality information. And so I'm always looking at, like, one, if there's something in front of me that I don't understand, I'm trying to get as much information as possible. You know, I dig into audiobooks and things like that. That's the intellectual side. Now, the other side of me, the Marine side of me, is like, hey, if I'm in a war, right, and if I'm in a skirmish, in any kind of combat, my edge is that I'm going to make decisions so much faster than my enemy that he's going to have to react off of my decisions. And so there's a huge piece that comes from self-reliance and having to live by faith and building the parachute on the way down so many times. That's like, hey, like, I'm going to start cracking shots on this thing. And I might be making like a 30% correct decision, but I'm going to clean it up. Like, if I can get my gun out and I'm starting from here, maybe I'm getting those rounds right beneath the belt, and I can clean up as I'm moving. So I'm all about making the best decision as quickly as I can, which may not be the perfect decision, and continuing to stack action and decision on top of those, and to where it's like an accumulative score. And now I'm controlling the pace of the fight. And so I will stack decisions in action. And I remember when I was getting my master's in psychology, my professor was asking me a question like that. And she was like, well, what do you do you know, because she was kind of mad at me because I was like, I was that guy in the class. Like I was the one dude, you know, it's like all female dominated. And I remember the conversation was about like, well, if you're feeling these emotions, if your client's feeling these emotions, you need to go into the emotions. You need to understand the emotions. And I just remember just everything in me was like, ugh, ugh, and she could smell it. And I remember just looking at her and being like, ah, and she was like, okay, Byron, what do you think? And I was like, I don't know, you know, like if you show me a better way, I'll use it. But for me personally, if I'm faced with a setback or get punched in the face by a situation or whatever, I am suspending my emotions. If me and my boy hit that door and there's an enemy in there and my buddy gets shot in the face, I'm going to step over his body and I'm going to eliminate that threat. And then I'll deal with all the emotions and things like that. So when I'm challenged with something, I suspend my emotions. I come up with a plan and I begin executing. And happiness comes from progress. Progress equals happiness. And then once I start making that momentum, it's like, man, what am I going to do about this weight? Well, like, let's come up with a plan. Maybe every single day I can do a little something to lose a little bit more weight. Once you start losing a little bit of weight, guess what? You start feeling kind of better about it. You start getting that momentum going. And then once I start getting some momentum going, progress equals happiness, then I check back in with my emotions. And so it's kind of the same thing. Control what you can control, prioritize, execute, rinse and repeat. And as kings, as leaders, as fathers, as human beings that have a lot of responsibility, we have to make an ungodly amount of 100-pound decisions. That's right. You know, 300-pound decisions every day, right? And so there's actually a skill of decision making I've been noticing that we just have to cultivate, right?
Totally.
And it can get exhausting. I wear the same thing almost every day. I remember hearing about some CEOs doing that. I got like a couple of outfits.
Totally.
And because it's one less freaking decision, bro.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
But yeah, man, I'm fine with making a decision that I believe is the best at the moment. I'm fine with taking some damage, and I will clean it up on the move.
There's certainly something that I'm seeing now, that the crippling effect of people who live in peril and fear of making the wrong decision,
right?
And you just don't fucking move.
Bro.
And it's like that, you know. I'm seeing that just destroy people left and right. And then I'm also recently running into a bunch of motherfuckers who I'm just like, you perpetually make the wrong decision. Like, it's just God damn, dude, you just do not have that fucking skill. Like maybe just go the opposite. Like right. Decide fully, believe in it fully, and then just do the opposite because your shit is just fucking awful. Yeah, like well, I'm seeing that a lot too these days.
No, 100%, man. And that is the one thing I would say that I'm always watching is because I go deep, man, and I can bury myself. My vulnerability is I can go too hard, make too many decisions too quick, and then be enveloped by tasks and really have to fight my way out. But then that causes the amount of skills you learn while you're trying to solve all those equations. And then when you start knocking things off your plate, like you're so much more dangerous. But that's my vulnerability, is I can put too much on my plate at times.
Yeah, for sure.
And I've had to realize that. But my true north also is that spiritual development aspect. So if I'm faced with a huge decision, dude, I'll fast. I've fasted for 40 days. I've gone 40 days on just liquid. You know, because I need to get clear. I need to silence the voices in my body. I need to not have my stomach and all. When I'll fast. I try to fast at least from Sunday to Tuesday, at least once a week. You know, every year I try to do at least 13 days to 15 days of a fast at the beginning of the year to get focused on what exactly he really wants me to execute on. Twice a day, I try to have a conversation with my Heavenly Father in the morning and nighttime, because that's really my true north. Because what I've learned also is that my plans that come from my level of intelligence, they don't really always work. Like they don't really, sure. It's not where I'm not a good God, you know? So he's my true north, you know? And so if I can get a sign from him or a nudge on like, hey bro, zig, don't zag there, that has saved my life and has gotten me to where I'm at.
Are there times where your instincts have led you in one strong direction that you have felt like, I want to go this way, but then through spiritual practice, through the conversations that you're able to have, it's led you a different way and you've realized that your instinct was wrong?
Yeah, 100%, man. So like when I got out of the Marine Corps and then I got right into executive protection, I was like, well, to be completely honest, I didn't really like it at first, right? So I still had to calm down, you know, like I just got back from war and I'm now like, you know, basically just looking after somebody, right? So for me, I felt like a Lamborghini that was like forced to drive 25 miles an hour in a school zone. Like I felt like a freaking T-Rex that was forced to be a vegetarian. It's like Nerf for the rest of my life. Totally. My PTSD was like, I never get to be that dope. Like I never get to be a savage again ever. Like I gotta be nice to people all the time, And so, when I first got into the industry, I had a lot of like cognitive dissonance around like really like this is it. Like I just like I'm never gonna be able to exercise this warrior thing inside me. And if you don't figure out how to put that to good use, remember, power without a purpose is a problem. It will eat you alive. The wolf will eat you if you don't learn how to exercise the wolf. And so I found outlets for that, and I found ways to serve. But the point is, I didn't want to do EP protection work for the rest of my life. Like I started to be like strength versus power. How can I like free myself and like live my own life and like become a businessman? So I went through this whole years of trying to start different companies, man, and different things. And none of them really worked out for years. And then finally, my Heavenly Father was like, yo, bro, just start a podcast, dude. And I was like, nah, that's not businessy enough. My immaturity caused me to keep starting all these, I started like a marketing agency, learned about online sales and all these different things. And the thing is, all things work together for the good of those who love God and are called by his purpose. And so what ends up happening is even all those failed attempts at different businesses, what ended up happening was when I finally listened and he was like, just start a podcast about executive protection. When I finally did that, it blew up. Not because I'm so dope, but because like there's no one in the space. There's no podcast in the space. It's an industry. And I made it look kind of cool, And so then that was blessed and exploded. And then every skill I learned from all those different types of business attempts, especially the online marketing and social media, understanding all that stuff,
started funneling.
Just all of a sudden I was like kind of decent at this and so I was able to use all those skills to take everything to the next level and built the brand and became one of the most recognized dudes in the space.
When you did when your time in the military, your time in combat, what would you say is like the code, like the integrity, the North Star of being a Marine? And have you ever seen anybody adhere to that? Give me an example of that, of somebody who you feel is, sort of has lived up to that.
Yeah. That's an interesting question.
Or something you saw in combat that exemplified that.
Exemplified that. Yeah. I would say, and then really one thing that just came back to me on what we were just talking about, I would just say, to answer your question in the best way, I'd say, even when you make the wrong decisions, you're still winning, as long as you're learning. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn.
For sure.
Stop worrying about making the wrong decisions. Just start freaking taking shots.
Straight up.
And clean it up on the move, man.
Straight
it's all going to serve you.
Straight up.
As long as you're taking action. But I'd say in the Marine Corps, the ethos, the North Star of the Marine Corps is being the most savage humans you can be, the most professional savage humans you can be with the highest level of discipline, and in service to the dream of the United States, right? I can be honest, I'd have a hard time being a Marine right now and having a mission set being given to me by, this political climate would make me second guess a little bit about what they might ask me to do, but if I was going to say something that exemplified, that ethos, it's really found in the everyday, life of us in combat, man. Like when I'm out there on post and my leadership would come up and like relieve me or support me, and like these guys would do the most, they would lead from the front. They would, carry the most weight. They would, I had guys like Corporal Praxidus and Eric Hicks. Like these guys are like my brothers to this day because we were in combat together and I always saw them go the distance. Like, it's always it's always the leader that wouldn't just use rank, but would be out there with us, and like my first night in combat, having Praxidus with me and being like, just being in my ear the whole time, like we hit our first house, and he's like, find me something, Rodgers. And I'm like, these are nice people, like they're over here, Ana Habibi Marines, yeah, like no problem, La Mushkala, we love you, and he's like, these guys are Mouge, Rodgers. And I'm like, you're just mad because you just got back from Fallujah. These are nice people. I have no idea. I'm still a civilian in that way, you know? And, you know, finding, you know, long story short, you know, finding a 155 anti-tank shell in the middle of that courtyard, finding expended rounds where they were shooting at us the night before, you know, finding weapons that were like booby trapped to blow up when we pulled them out, you know. It's a long story. You know, I found a bomb and almost blew myself up, and you know, like
on your first night.
Yeah, my first, like, you know, the invasion of Haditha. You know, I don't know if we have story time here, but
you're good, bro.
Okay, yeah, no. So the invasion of Haditha, you know, I think it was like 3 a.m. We're painting skeletons on our faces on the top of Haditha Dam, checking our weapons, getting ready to go in. Like, if you can imagine, like the sheer terror of a bunch of 18, 19, 20-year-olds kicking in your door. You know, I'm carrying a rocket launcher. I'm carrying a small, which is just a big rocket system. I got a rifle, you know. I've got a lot of crap on me. I weigh 300 pounds with all my gear. You know, my fight weight in Iraq was about 200 pounds, 198 pounds. And so, you know, we get ready to do this invasion. And we're on the Haditha Dam, painting skeletons on our faces. Everyone's getting hopped up, getting ready to rock. And we push out into the desert, and I'm looking at Haditha, you know, just driving towards it. You know, it's all black, and you just see, like, this city, and we're coming to this city. We stop in the middle of the desert. We link up with our Iraqi army guys, you know, and it's like you're in a whole nother world, man. It's almost like you're in an aquarium or something. Like it's just so unreal. The stars are like in your face because there's no ambient light other than that city. And the Iraqis start, you know, talking to you in Arabic, you know, like, when Tuscan, like, where are you from? You know, Enta Madame, like, do you have a wife? Like, and we're all like, they're trying to talk to you. And I'm like, kind of, and all the senior Marines are kind of talking back to him because you learn a little bit. And I'm like, this is gnarly, bro. And we get back in the vehicles and we're rolling towards the city. And all of a sudden I just see the power go off. Boom. And, I was just so fresh. I didn't know what was going on. I'm like, yo, the power just went out. And I was like, that's kind of convenient, you know? And one of my senior Marines is like, idiot. Like, recon just shut the power off. We're finna hit these dudes. And I'm like, okay, all right, you know. And we're rolling, and then a Bradley, an army unit, goes flying past us to get to the city before us because they wanted to get, like, the glory of getting into the city first. But they went into a minefield that the enemy put out around the city. And so now I get to see just kaboom, my first explosion. And I'm looking at this mushroom cloud, and I'm thinking, like, man, you know, like, I didn't know. I thought only, like, nuclear blast. Like, I didn't know that everything made mushroom cloud. You're having all these, like, disassociative thoughts, right? And, you know, then you start hearing the rounds crack off, like, all the ammo cooking off inside the vehicle, and dudes are coming out, and you're hearing screaming, and all this stuff's happening. And that's when I start, the reality of combat started to set in, and I was like, this doesn't look real. And then that voice in my head, my Heavenly Father, was like, you don't know what real is yet, son. And then right then, dude, we shoot off these APOBs, which is a rocket with like 100 grenades on a string. Goes out into the minefield, shoo, lands, boom, blows a big chasm in the minefield, pushes the mines aside, freaking tanks. So you just hear these Abrams just like power up. They sound like jets and tanks at the same time. They're like, and then, whoa, and the ground is shaking. Freaking PsyOps kicks on the metal bands, and they got like freaking rock music. Like, they have concert speakers on Hummers, and, you know, we crack off green smoke, and we are invading the city. There's a cloud of green smoke. Wow. AC/DC, freaking Alt Pearl, all these metal bands playing because they believe that's like demonic music. Yep. And we're going into the city. There's a tank. We got to stay in the tracks of the tank, man. And we're just running through the tracks of this tank into this city. And we finally get into the city. And I remember now I'm carrying like multiple rockets. I have my rocket launcher slung, you know, my little heart's beating. I'm like, like, when are they going to crack off the first shots? When are we getting in our first fight? And I remember turning a corner, and I see a hand, and I see something wooden in their hand, and it looked like an AK handle. And I just remember coming up, touching my trigger, and it's just an old dude sitting there in his window watching us. And I just almost smoked this old dude. Yeah. Like, almost for real, almost smoked him. And I remember being like, dude, you got to calm down. Yeah. You got to calm down. Yeah. And we continue invading the city. We find our first house. We take it over, put the family in one room. put them under, basically arrest the family, put them in a room, put a Marine in there, get to the roof, and we're sitting on the roof, and I'm just listening. And then they changed it from rock music into psyops, just like the messing with your senses music. So now you're hearing like women crying in the distance, babies crying, evil laughter, sniper shots, all the creepiest noises they can come up with, tank shots. You're hearing the soundtrack that's messing with everyone's minds. Then you hear the mosque up the street kick on, and they're like, getting down with their shout out night, Akbar, kill the infidel, all this stuff, and it's freaking going down. And I remember Corporal Praxis in that moment coming up next to me, and he's like, how you doing, Rodgers? And I'm on the roof just like, and dogs are barking. There's little firefights sound like popcorn in the distance. People are yelling, running around, and I'm just sitting up there. And this before anything cracks off, and he's like, how you doing, Rodgers? And I'm like, I'm good, Corporal. And he's like, freaking Twilight Zone out here, isn't it? And I'm like, yeah, it is. And then he goes back down, and that was my first night in combat. And that next morning is when we raided that house, and he's like, find me something. And I end up unburying a bomb, picking up a bomb in front of everyone. Everyone jumps out of the courtyard, and I'm the demo guy, so I got to deal with it anyway. It just, the stories go on from there, like one Marine shoots another one in the hand. Like it just gets nuts, before we make contact. But, and we get our first bit of contact was when the enemy drove a V-bed, a vehicle-borne bomb into us. And by the grace of God, it didn't detonate properly. It was 250 pounds of explosives. I think it was like 7 propane tanks that were rigged to blow at the same time.
That was that next morning?
Yeah, that was that next morning. Well, like later on that evening. It didn't blow. If it would have blown, we would have got decimated. And all of the explosions started going one by one. So this poor guy's in his vehicle. He tried to kill us. And you just see this big kaboom, and we're like, whoa. And so we all start moving towards that vehicle, and then kaboom, 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 kaboom. And it just felt like it blew up forever. And then all of a sudden, he starts moving around in there. And by this time, we're all positioned. Oh, man, and I don't know how crazy we want to get on here, but
that's cool, man. Yeah,
man. And he crawls out the window, and the whole platoon was right there online, man. And he got, we helped him out, man, because he was already blown up 7 times.
Sure.
And that was my first taste of war. We picked up the pieces, strapped him to the front of our Humvee, and drove him to the mosque and said, hey, we're 3-1. If this is how you guys want to play, basically, there's going to be a lot more of this. And the next few weeks were quiet.
Wow.
And that was my, that was.
Did you hate those guys?
I've always, when it comes to killing and combat, I've always been, I don't like to dehumanize my enemy. I think that it's a mistake. I think my enemy is a person who grew up different and had different experiences, and I could very easily be that guy.
That's right.
If I grew up in that zip code, I could very easily be that guy. And I think there's a reverence that comes with killing when you understand that. If I would have been a young boy in the same town who probably would have joined that same military.
These dudes
bro.
rolling in, playing all that music.
Yep. It's just my crew had a lot of
how common
more
is
stuff.
That, do you think? How common is that? Like that sort of like level of that sort of like level of, I don't know what you want to call it, empathy or understanding or like tactical sort of like proficiency to understand to do. Like,
I think it comes with maturity, man. Like back then, at that age, the Marine Corps did such a tremendous job at like really getting us programmed for war. Like, hey bro, can you hand me that coffee? Kill. Like that's how we talk to each other. Like, yo, I'm gonna hit the head real quick. Kill. Yeah, like like that's just how we behave. And so it's really easy to want to use your training, and 2 to just kill. And for me, I didn't like zombie video games. I always wanted to fight humans. I always just realized that in this reality, we don't like war. I hate war. We don't like combat. But as long as there are evil people, which there absolutely are, I have a responsibility of being much more proficient at violence than them, because violence is the foundation of society. And if you're not capable of violence, and if then whatever you want, your way of life, me asking some dude who you asking someone to do something, if you're not capable of violence, it's just a suggestion, And so I always looked at that. There's an emblem that we use with my brand, and it's that steel-faced warrior who's got an iron mask on. He has one teardrop, and it's for that reason. It's like, hey, I understand, that you're a human and you have a family and all that stuff. But in this situation, unfortunately, we've got to go. We're going against each other, and may the best man win. And that's the humanity of war. And that's why I don't ever want war. But I must be better at it, because I'm going to protect my way of life and my family.
That's right. Well, I mean, I guess so much. Like, one more thing just about the military, because I know you were injured, and like, can you talk to me just a little bit about, I mean, you got into a little bit with that last story, but a little bit about fear and like what
fear management.
Fear management. And when was the first time that you were like, this is not gonna go good? And when walk me through a little bit about what that's like for something to go off the way that it went off, and when you realize, hey, I might not make it out of this.
No, I'll talk about like my out of body experience, but like with fear is such an important piece of reality. I always say fear is my best friend and my worst enemy. It lets me know where to attack and how hard to fight. Like when I look at my everyday life, what I'm afraid of is what I focus on. It's like, if there's any place where I can grow exponentially, it's like, yo, what are you scared of, dog? Like,
what are you weak
what is the and like, what is the one task you're procrastinating around right now? Like, and that's how I take that combat mindset into everyday life, to attack it as hard as I can. And so there's so many things I had to do afraid, I love fear. It's the most motivating emotion that exists. So I allow myself to be a little bit afraid. If I'm in a fight, if I'm in a fight or dealing with anyone, I don't care how much I think I can probably win, I approach it with fear. I allow myself to be a little bit afraid. I'm afraid of failing. I'm afraid of my buddies not being able to depend on me, and I use that to make it so that I stay up late. I stay up long enough. I work hard. I'm afraid of not providing opportunities for my employees. I'm afraid of going bankrupt. I mean, like I believe that if you really mastering fear is putting it in a healthy category that makes you get into action, right? And so since from boot camp into combat, there were so many things that I had to learn to manage fear. One time where fear got me was when I first got to my unit, and we were doing our first training op in mountain warfare, learning how to clear cities and stuff. And we're shooting simunition, and simunition hurts, man. It's like, it is a bullet with a wax projectile, but it is a bullet. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I remember we freaking kicking the door, and we're raiding this house, and I got the other platoon is securing the house. We're finna get into a fight right now. And sure enough, man, one of the 11s, man, one of the infantry dudes is sitting. We kick in the door, and there's a long hallway, and this dude's sitting at the back of the hallway underneath the staircase with a saw of freaking Sims, man. And like, we kick the door, and my senior Marine goes in front of me, and I'm right behind him, and dude opens up with the saw. Wah! And the first Marine gets in, dips into the first room, and I just come in and I just blow back out of the hallway, because I'm like, dude, I'm gonna get smoked. And I felt it was like slow motion. I felt the fear. I identified the threat, and I backed off. And my Marine, my senior Marine, came back out of that room. He called a timeout, and he's like, listen. And now in the Marine Corps, in the fleet, you just get beat. Like, you just get jumped. Everyone circles around. You just get jumped, like, constantly. If you make a mistake, I don't care how bad you are. When the platoon descends on you, you're gonna get jumped. But that was so serious, and that's what got my attention. Is he said, listen, you never let a brother go into a room by himself. And this might be one of your questions. This might be, the answer to one of your previous questions. This was another time where I got to really see the love that is necessary to do war well as a unit. He's like, you never let another Marine go into a room by himself. And he was like, I don't care if you have to die to get in that room with him. If you're going to die in that room with him, you guys hit that door. You guys take that freaking room together. And, those dudes, my big bros, there was a situation where a dude ended up going to a room by himself, got himself chopped in half, dangled out of a window for the rest of the platoon to sit there and watch. So, those lessons turned me into I always had an engine, the warrior engine, but those lessons really taught me how to really commit to a fight or a movement or a piece, an attack. And that, like, I am fine with dying right now. That is a way of life. It's even in business, in everyday life. These three things today, I will die or I'll get them done. This is a whole way of life that I think is extremely valuable. But to go into like kind of the second part of your question, for me, one of the other times fear gripped me was during a mission called Pegasus Bridge when we were on my second deployment. And the unit, so we have Lima Company, we have India Company. In my battalion, India Company is the boat battalion. They're the boat guys. They're like the best Marines that come into that unit. Not the best. I don't want to, but like, I didn't even want to be in boat company. like these guys are amphibious. We're all amphibious, but like they were like the probably most legit company in our battalion. We did force on force. You guys know they wrecked us. They did. So I had a lot of respect for this crew. During the deployment, I ended up finding a weapons cache like out at the edge of our AO. So like we expanded our area of operation deeper into enemy territory because I found like a bunch of weapons out there. So we end up pushing into this new area called I don't remember what it's called, but the mission was Pegasus Bridge. So we push out there. India Company goes first, and they take a lot of casualties, like more than we ever really take as Marines. It was odd. And the next morning, they're spinning us up. I'm a mobile assault platoon, so basically all your like heavy machine guns, guys like me, rockets, demo, that's what I do. We're in a big, convoy, and we just go to the fight, end the fight, roll out, right? We go and support the different units if there are things going on, if they're in contact and stuff. So India Company took a bunch of casualties overnight, and so they're like, weapons, mount up. You're going to go support India Company for this Pegasus Bridge operation. And I'm like, how did they take so many casualties? We're already kind of like off balance. So we drive out there, and we spend the morning picking up the pieces. Like they were using IEDs to blow Humvees into like swamps and drown everyone in the vehicle. Damn. Hummers, like they did damage. We're like now diving to the bottom of wells to get 240 Golfs, and like, so it was just an eerie place, man. And so you can feel the energy in an environment. Like when you're driving down the city and like all the kids are out like, Ana Habibi, Marines, yeah. And like, yeah, like we love you. You're good. Like, and they're looking at you like you're a superhero astronaut, and they like are like friendly and stuff. I love the kids. You feel safe. It's pretty safe. But then you'll turn down another street and there's like no civilians and it's quiet, and you're like,
this is fucked.
Yeah, we're finna get hit. Like, yeah, it's like eyes up, boys, So we get to Pegasus Bridge, and it's that eerie feeling again. We're like something bad's for sure gonna happen. And we get done picking up the pieces and putting things back together, and we're picking up where India left off and supporting them. And we're driving like just a few blocks away, and my sergeant's like, hey, Rodgers, hop in my vehicle. I'm gonna give you the plan for what we're gonna do when we get up here. And I just remember being like, this is not good. Like, I don't feel good. Like, I just remember being like my spidey senses. And I always kind of had those, like, I just know when something's about to go down. Kind of, I'm that guy who's like, yo, bro, it's about to get real. And then it does. And sure enough, man, like, I remember kind of trying not to freak out. And my sergeant is like, I'm like, hey, sergeant, I'm not soft, but like, I want to go back to my vehicle. Like, I don't feel comfortable back here. Cause I was in his Humvee, and my 7-ton, it's like an up armored semi truck. Like if it gets hit, it's the best place to survive. And I was like, I saw a Bible in the back seat, and I like pulled it and I like read it. It made me feel good for like a second. And I put it back, and I was just like, this is not it. Yeah. And my little Jundi, my little boot driver is like, also like, we're all like, we're hitting houses, and the owners are like, you guys seem like nice people. They're like, and we're Marines, so we're like, we're the bad guys at, and they're like, listen. They're like, you really should go home. Yeah. And I remember that it was the first time ever. They never do that. They're always like, oh, la mushkala, like no problems, like you guys are great. And then like they try to shoot at you, or someone ambushes, shoots, and But this was different. They looked at us like humans, and they were like,
you have no
guys,
idea what's
like I know you're tough, but like, nah, man, get out of here while you can, And that was really weird for me. I was like, we're the Marine Corps, right? And sure enough, dude, like,
were other guys feeling that too? Like,
our whole unit was kind of like, okay, like what's gonna happen, Yeah. And I'm sitting in the back of that freaking Humvee, and I'm like, Sergeant, I want to go back to my vehicle. Can I go back up? And he's like, when we get to this next stop, you can hop back up there with your boys. I was a troop commander, so I had my squad that I was in charge of. In the back of that, like 7-ton up armored semi-truck, those are my guys. I trained them. And if there's a fight, I get out with them and we start doing what we do while the boys give us cover from the machine guns on top of the vehicles, right? So I was like, I got to get back to my vehicle. I'm gonna die in this Hummer, like. And sure enough, we keep rolling. Sergeant tells me I can get out. My boy Cressa is driving. He's a young Marine. He's just sitting there, and he's scared. And humans, when they're scared, they start to bunch up and they want to get close to each other. And so he's driving really close to the lead vehicle. And I remember being like, "Yo, bro, back up." And he kind of backs up, and then a few minutes later, he's like right on top of the lead vehicle again, and we just punch him in the side of the head. And I'm like, "Back up, dog! You're gonna get us killed. We're gonna get hit by secondaries. They're gonna get hit, and then we're gonna get blasted as well because we're too close. We have to be here to take care of them." He backs up, and I look in front of me, right at my guys. I look through that front windshield into my vehicle where I should have been sitting, and I just remember seeing this explosion come up out of the ground, like hell opened up. And I remember seeing the sides of the semi-truck has these armored walls. And I remember just seeing them come up like wings, man. Ugh. And then just flat back down, and then shoo, the fire goes right back into the ground. It's just like boom. Shoo. And then I watch, my boy Tommy Gun Martinez, man. He was with me since SOI, man. Like since we grew up together in the game, you know what I'm saying? And he just comes, his body's still moving, but he's jacked up, and he just like runs to the door, and then he just falls out. It's like a 7-foot drop from the bottom of the 7-ton, and he just wham hits the ground. Now we don't know, if it's that initiated an ambush, if we're gonna start taking sniper fire, RPK fire. Or what's going to happen. So, we get out, and I'm running in there to get my dudes. Now this is that fear that I was dealing with, just knowing what I was in was probably the heaviest, because it was like this inactive fear, right? Once the killing starts and the fighting starts, you're kind of relieved. You're like, kind of like, all right, now like I can just fight, like I can let this energy out. And they didn't get me, you know what I mean? Like I'm still in the fight. I got to do all I can. I'm running in to get to my boys. And now what's going through your head is they'll set a secondary charge underneath the first one, so that when you get there to do triage, they can exponentially multiply the casualties, right? So they detonate the second one on you. So now you really have to make a decision, and you're managing that fear again. Like, am I going to take action and be selfless and possibly die right now to get my guys out of there? Or am I going to sit back and watch and, and creep up? And dude, me and all my guys rush in. I'm rushing to my guys. The rest of the platoon rushes in. We're getting everybody out. I'm setting security, 360 degrees security in. We're triaging our dudes. I open the driver's side window. Narum was driving. Another guy I knew from SOI, just flops out completely lifeless, falls out of the vehicle. And we're checking on him, trying to see if he's okay. I'm making sure that my guys have 360 degrees security. He's non-responsive. So, we start to declare him dead by reading his kill card. You carry a number on you. So we're reading his kill card and his number off. And I remember just staring at him while they're zipping his face up in that body bag. And I remember being like, man, I knew Narum, like, probably better than his family at that point, man. Like, I helped him lose weight. Like I you know what I mean? Like I'm having this like flashback. And I remember, I felt like my Heavenly Father was like, watch this, like stare at him, don't look away. And I was staring at him, and right before that body bag completely zipped up, he blinked. And dude, when he blinked, I was like, he's still alive, man. We descended on him, ripped him out of that bag. He was completely unresponsive. He just blinked that one time, and we proceed to beat the brakes off of Narum to keep him alive, because just to keep him here, dude. So we're beating him up, sternum rubs, chest compressions, like just stomping him out to keep him alive, like just keeping him like going. And he's like, and honestly, he just wasn't even really responsive. We call in air, we call in a Casevac for him, a medevac for him. Foster got blown up. Foster been blown up. Foster racked up 10 IEDs by the end of that deployment. So when I say I've been hit 5 times, people are like, oh my gosh, dude, Foster had been through, I watched Foster's been through about 10 of them. So they sent the wrong bird. So we had one helicopter show up, and then we loaded him up, had to unload him, get him back out of there.
Holy shit.
And then a new bird came in that was his bird, and we got him out of there, and a few of our guys out of there. And then sure enough, man, like I'm looking around and I'm like, okay, I think we're secure. We have 360 degrees of security. I'm starting to power down. There's a lot of snipers, so I have to take a knee. And it's I hear that voice again. It's like, hey, look at your feet. I look down at my feet, and there's 2 hacksaw blades that are just in between. They're just sitting there right above the sand. And there's a big crate next to it where the explosion had came out. And then there's the initiation device, right? So the 2 hacksaw blades, if they touch, it completes a circuit, goes down into the munitions, and that's what blows us up. So it really looked like they had ran over. That's what actually blew them up. And so I stop, and I'm like, hey, guys. And I swear it was a really crazy moment, man. It was a crazy moment in time. I felt like the world stopped spinning. If there was a tumbleweed, like a tumbleweed. And I'm like, hey, guys, I'm like, this is what blew you guys up right here. And I go down to pick this thing up, and I hear that voice again. It's like, don't push that, pick it up, inspect it, And I'm like going down to touch this thing, and I do the math, and I'm like, and I argue, I'm like, it just got blown up. It's good, And I felt this feeling like my protection left me. Like it was like, I taught you how to listen. I already told you, like
and you're doing your own thing.
Yeah, you're either gonna listen or you're not.
Yeah.
And I remember that feeling of, I've always felt protected, man. I've been through so many things. I've always felt protected. And I remember that protection kind of being like a dad being like, hey bro, I told you what to do, now you can go learn, and right before I push that thing, I'm like, and I grab it and I tug on it and I start to inspect it. And I realize I'm standing on top of 2 155 anti-tank shells that are rigged to blow as a secondary that was there for us to step on accident. It's between my legs. You'd have found like wallet-sized pieces of Kevlar body armor 200 yards away. I'd have been pink mist. And I'd have blown my boy up who was next to me. And we had just lost 2 Marines that way, like the day or 2 before. And dude, I grab my guys and I pull them off the street. Tinez is upright. We go to hit a house. I thank God no one was in that house because we were enraged at that moment, and we get off the street. And so, I don't remember why, but that in that story, there's these different types of fear, man. There's that fear when you can't do anything and I'm sitting in the back of a Humvee waiting to get blown up. That was the worst type of fear. The second that the explosion went off and we got to get into action, fear fear while I'm being active, that's the fear that I like. That's the fear that I'm going for. Doing things while I'm afraid. I'm going to rescue my guys. I might die today, but I'm going to die with honor, I'm going to create this business. It might make me go bankrupt, but guess what? I'm going to learn some things and I'm going to provide some trash for my family and my guys, And that's the little space I live in. By the grace of God, we're going to get this done, or we're going to die a really good death going after it. And it's been one of the most profitable ways to live my life.
Wow.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'd probably say the most defining moment of my life, was probably when I did catch that last IED during my second deployment, which actually resulted in me not being able to do our last mission because they said, hey, we have a few guys that have been hit enough to where we can't afford to let them get hit again. So they ended up helicoptering me out, which was horrible to go through. But yeah, man, no, we were rolling down the street and I was really upset about some stuff going on back home. And so I was really on edge. And, I'll skip ahead a little bit, but the bottom line is, we're rolling down the street and I hear Foster, that guy who'd been hit by a lot of IEDs. He developed like a sixth sense, right? So he just would know. He just would have a feeling. Like you would hear him say something like, man, I got a bad feeling today, like something. So he comes over the radio and he's like, hey, Tonto, my sergeant, he's like, hey, Tonto, I'm going to just stop for a second. I got a bad feeling. And Tonto's like, yeah, roger that, take a minute. And he's like, Silverback, you good? That was my call sign, was Silverback, of course. In the Marine Corps, there's no racism. Everybody's getting hooked up. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody's getting hit. So, You know, no matter what color creed you are, you're going to get some, and we all love each other. And it's just, we're above that, man. So, you know, he's like, Silverback, you good with me taking a quick break? I'm like, Roger that, do what you got to do. So he gets ready to stop and do kind of a security, get out and kind of do some security and look at the ground and whatnot. And as he rolls to a stop, I'm just in a black room. Like, I think if I think really hard about it, I might be able to like remember feeling the energy go through my body. My boy Hebert was sitting where you're sitting, right across from me, facing me. You know, all my guys are facing outboard. I'm the squad leader. I put myself in the safest place. I'm at the very back, sitting on top of a water cooler, a Gatorade water cooler. And I'm facing Hebert, and he says the last thing that he saw was me folded in half on the top of the 7-ton with my legs out, and me just like looking at him like in shock. Like, and other than that, I didn't even know I'd been blown up. 60 some odd pounds of homemade explosives was buried underneath the road and detonated directly underneath me. And I'm in this black room and everything's okay. Like, I'm super chill. Like, I'm super just like.
And you remember that?
That's the next place my consciousness picked up, was me being like, just like hanging out. And I remember kind of being like, relieved. And I was like, why? Like, what was I doing? Like, why am I at peace so much right now? And next thing you know, man, I asked, like, I remember I could see my thoughts. I remember being able to call up my thoughts. And I remember kind of being like, what was my last thought? And it was, why is the water cooler trying to come up my butt, was really what I was thinking.
Come on my butt?
Yeah, literally. And it's because I was sitting on a water cooler when that charge detonated underneath me. And so I felt all that pressure. And I was like, and I guess that was my last thought. And then I started to kind of realize, like, oh my gosh, like, I think I'm dead. And I had this realization, like, I'm a pile of guts on the floor in Iraq. And I was like, what was I doing? And it started to come back to me. What was I doing? I was on a patrol in Iraq. Where was I sitting? I was sitting on a water cooler. Oh, and I started to have this recall, like, oh, and then I started to be like, I was on patrol and I'm dead. And right when that started to happen, I started to see my family. And I started to go to my family. Like, I saw my mom washing dishes, and I saw my sister, and I was apologizing to everyone. And I was like, Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I died in Iraq. And like, they couldn't hear me, but I was like there with them, you know, and I saw like my girlfriend at the time, and and I was like, I'm so sorry. And I was like trying to tell everyone I was sorry and goodbye, basically. And I finally got to my grandma. And my grandma used to always tell me, she used to always say, like, you know, Byron, if there's ever anything stronger than you, you just say Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And it's really cheesy. Like, I wish it was cooler. You know what I mean? Like, I wish it was like tougher. You know, say Jesus, by the third time it'll go away. And I just remember I started praying, man. I started being like, Jesus, you got to get me out of here. Like, save me. Like, I'm powerless. Like, I'm done. I'm so sorry. And I remember being so sorry that I lived my whole life 18, 19 years old. I remember being like, I can't believe that it's over. Like, I can't believe that. Like, I realized in a second how big of a miracle opening your eyes was and getting to do this. I realized in a second how much of a just unfathomable miracle consciousness, reality, the 60 some trillion cells that are working simultaneously, synergistically right now to give us this opportunity to do this. And I started to and I just felt so heartbroken that I had squandered it. And I remember just praying, and I remember the prayer I said to God. I said, Father, I may never be everything you've called me to be. I was like, but if you give me a chance to go back, I promise I will go so hard in the paint. And I said it just like that. I was like, I'll go so hard in the paint. I may never be everything you call me to be, but I will give my best to live the best. I'll go as hard as I can at making the most of another opportunity. And I all of a sudden I was in my body. And I remember at some point I was able to look at my buddy, and he was looking at my body, and I wasn't able to look at my body, but I was looking at him, and he was like in shock. And I just kept praying, man. And next thing you know, I was in my body. My boys hear me, you know, saying Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. They still make fun of me to this day. They're like, I heard you in the corner over there, you know. And I end up back in my body, and I remember my dad got shot at point blank range with a shotgun, and he was declared dead multiple times. And I remember, asking him as a kid, saying like, Dad, like, how did you not die? Like, is there something you can give me? And he's like, son, you die when you give up. He's like, I never gave up. They declare me dead and I would fight back. I had to live. I had to live for your mom. I had to live for this. I had to live for you.
Yeah,
I remember.
yeah.
And I get back in my body and I can't move my body. And I'm just like, I'm able to open my eyes. And I remember being like, Father, I can't do this if I can't have my body, like, take me. Like, I can't have it be like this, man.
Yeah.
And sure enough, man, I hear my dad, like, and I remember when I got to my dad, when I was apologizing to him, I was so heartbroken because I remember him saying, son, don't die. Yeah. And I remember being like, pray for me, and I was like, Dad, I'm so sorry I failed, And then I hear him saying like, son, when you die, you quit when you die. And I started fighting, man. I started fighting and I prayed. I asked for my body. I asked to have power over everything again. And I got that power back. And it almost felt like one of those Abrams charging. Like I felt like I felt like I powered up, dude. And I opened my eyes and I got up and I had this righteous anger that came over me. And I decided I'm not going to die here. And the vehicle's starting to kind of burn and catch on fire. And we're waiting for secondaries and waiting to get ambushed, and I got up out of that hole.
You became conscious in that room?
I became conscious back in the vehicle. So I was like in the undercarriage kind of the vehicle, and I crawled out of that. And then the door was jammed shut from the blast, like jarred shut, like the ladder was jarred shut. And we're all in there, and the smoke's starting to fill the vehicle. And this righteous anger came over me, and I kicked out the back of the 7-ton ladder, like kicked it back down. And I remember running up to the edge of the 7-ton, and I looked down, and it's like a 7-foot drop out of the back of one of those things. I weigh 300 pounds with all my kit on. I had 100 pounds a kit on. I looked down, and I black out. And my buddies, I black out, and I wake up in a field on a knee, setting security for myself. And my boys are still in the vehicle, still kind of like getting themselves together. They said, apparently I woke up, and I just like Superman jumped like 15 feet out the back of that vehicle and darted off into the reeds. And I'm setting security for myself on a knee, and I look back and my boys are still in the vehicle. I'm like, get out of the vehicle. And I get everyone out, and we storm the nearest building, and we find 6 guys in there, and we cleared that entire street. These were the only 6 guys on this street. And when you're over there, when you're fighting the bad guys, they're dressed a certain way when they're civilians, and they're dressed a certain way when they're mooj, as we would say, So these guys had their tennis shoes on, their jogging outfits on, their Adidas running track suits on. So like we knew these were the guys, So, we pull them all out, and there's about 6 of them. We line them up, and we're all still jacked up. I haven't had time to really assess my guys to see what's going on, or myself, really, And I ended up with with a class. I think it's a class 5 concussion because I went out for so long, and a fractured elbow. But overall, dude, 60 some pounds I took by the grace of God and came back. And sure enough, dude, we're like, who speaks English? And these dudes roll up. We're like, who speaks English? And one guy looks at me dead, and it was their alpha, looks me dead in my eyes, and he's like, I don't speak English. And he says it he says it so Englishy, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, so this is the guy, right? So now you got to imagine when you get blown up, man, you're furious. And so the rage starts to take over my dudes, and you get those anger tears are streaming. I'm looking at my boys. Bro. I don't know if someone's got internal hemorrhaging and is about to just fall over, and we're going to lose them.
It's like they did it.
Yeah, and these are the guys. And I ran into this gnarly choice point that I don't really usually talk about, but now I'm sitting here and my boys look at me and they're like, hey, man, we all know we have AKs in the back of the trunk. You know what I'm saying? We all know we could just leave some AKs and make the world a better place. You know what I'm saying? And it's kind of that when you're in a team like that, you become one organism. No one has to say anything. Everyone just knows what to do. And we put them on their knees, and I remember kind of being like, if I do this, if we just smoke these fools, I just remember being like, I'm going to be fine. But the rest of my guys, I started to think about like, I could see, like, I've always been able to see like paths, not the future, but paths, like possible outcomes. And I remember just being like, I could see like that dude sitting in a freaking lazy boy, like shooting himself 10 years later and no one knows why. Like, this is going to be cold blooded. And by the grace of God, I was able to get a hold of myself and my emotions and my ego and everything and say, hey, you know what? Good job, guys. We're just going to detain you. and we did the right thing.
And was it your call?
It was my call.
Was your call?
I was a squad leader,
Yep.
and
Yep.
so it was my decision. And
So, but you also knew as much as you knew, you could sense, you could see that some of these guys don't have the fab. Whatever it is,
Right.
this is gonna come back to haunt one of
Yeah,
these guys,
yeah.
and you ain't.
If I make this decision as a leader, I'm
Yeah.
going to put these guys in a position that I think is going to eat them alive.
But you
later
also
on in
knew
life.
just as plainly that
These
you
were-
could watch these dudes die, and it wasn't gonna affect you.
Yeah,
one
I
bit.
was going to be fine.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just,
yeah.
I don't know, for whatever reason, probably that perfect amount of trauma in childhood, I have a different emotional reality, very much so. But yeah, man. So fortunately, I'm proud of the fact that I made that decision, but it's
Yeah.
one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to
I
make.
can imagine. Did you get resistance?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, some of the older dogs on the team that had been through Fallujah were like, bro. And I was like, I know, man, but look at these other guys, man, and I know I made the right choice. But that moment was the defining moment in my life when I came back out of those ashes that I called my Phoenix moment, man. And from then on, I've endeavored to live life as hard as I can. Because
Wow.
that was a clear second chance.
Wow.
Fourth, fifth chance for
Yeah, man. Thank you for it's a hell of a fucking story, man. Wow.
Thank you.
When,
it's an honor.
when in your work, I mean, and relying so much on your experience, on your training, recognizing threats everywhere, the way that you define yourself as a warrior, as a protector.
Yeah.
You've lived that life. Does that ever? Can you ever turn that off? Do you want to turn that off? Like, does he ever turn that off? Like, or do you ever go out and are you ever like, this food's great, I'm going to take a picture of my cheesburger? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I think I know the answer because I know
Yeah.
the answer sort of in my own little, version of that. But yeah.
No, I think no, it doesn't ever turn off. I don't ever want it to turn off. Like for me, PTSD has been it's had its ups and downs. I struggled quite a bit when I first got out.
How so?
Dopamine. I was addicted to dopamine. So like my nightmare was the fact that I'm never going to be able to be like that intense again. Like I am legitimate. I can just feel when you feel the Lamborghini engine that you built, it's just rusting and corroding while you live this easy, nasty civilian life. And you can like, you know what I mean? And like, there's nothing's real. Like you hear people talk about problems and you're like, that's not a problem.
Yeah.
Like if I'm not cold and wet or no one's trying to kill me, it's not freaking really a problem. You know what I mean? Like, and it's just, everything's so just easy and, you know, and nothing will bring you closer to destruction than comfort. So for me, my PTSD was I wanted more dopamine out of life. So I started partying hard, doing all the drugs, and I'm a hardcore dude. So I'm dropping like 10 pills a night, press pills, ecstasy, and I'm a hardcore dude. So I'll wake up, hit the gym, be functional, go to work, freaking be switched on. Like it wasn't really a thing for me, but I had to recognize that like, hey bro, like what's really going on?
Mm-hmm.
Like, like what's you're for sure going to fail if you continue living your life like this.
Was there an acute thing? Was there something that switched there? How'd you make that decision?
Yeah. So like, I feel like anything, an object of motion needs an object of equal or greater mass to act upon it to stop it from being emotion, essentially. So I think that if you have a habit or something you're doing, like God, life, this matrix will give you like little like hints. You'll lose your job, then you'll lose your family. Then and it just like boom, 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 until you finally like are like, I'm going to give my life on the altar of this habit thing I can't not do.
Yes,
right?
I'm going to go completely the other direction.
Yeah, exactly. And so for me, I've always been, man, I've always been able to see those paths. And I was driving to Arizona one weekend, and me and the boys were just going to kick it. We're going to party a little bit. So I had like 80 pills of ecstasy on me. This happened. And someone's driving the car and I'm like, babe, listen, I'm black. I got a bunch of tattoos.
you know, I got a bunch of guns in the car because it's just how I behave. And I got about 80, 90 pills of X on me. I'm like, if don't get pulled over, I'm going to take a nap.
Yeah.
If you get pulled over, you will never see me again.
Yeah.
Because I'll take the rap and you will never see me again. I doze off. I get woken up. And I had this feeling, man. I had this feeling. And sure enough, I hear that, babe. Babe. You know. And I'm sitting here, you know, this is, you know, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, man. You know, and this is back just, you know, this is 2000 and, you know, 10, 9, 9, 10. Right. Okay. It's like, I'm like 18 versions of Byron since then. Right. Like, but yeah, bro, I look in the rearview mirror and I see those lights and I'm like, this is how I end. Yeah, like it was a good ride, dog, you know? Yeah. And sure enough, man, Officer Schmuckatelli, whoever it is, walks up and is like, you know how fast you're going. And I'm just like, okay, so I'm a black dude. I'm tatted up. I'm in the car. I got a whole bunch of freaking guns and drugs in here. Like, I'm so stereotypical. There's a little truth in every stereotype. Yeah, I'm like sitting so here like, come on, man. And so I tell the cop, I'm like, hey, you know, I got a CCW. I got a firearm on me. Just, I'm trying to like let him know that I'm good, whatever. Long story short, he pulls her out of the car and he just kind of wanted to like talk to her, hit on her. I don't know what, but I was like, do whatever you need to do. And he pulls her out of the car and like, you know, it's like, you were going fast. You know, I can impact the car and, you know, and by the grace of the good Lord, you know, I think 9 cops out of 10 would have been like, why don't you step outside the car real quick?
Let's see what you're all about.
If I was a cop, I'd have been like, why don't you step outside? You got anything in the car? I mean, so, and I wouldn't have blamed him at all, man. And my boys know I love my cop dudes and all that. It's good cops, bad cops, good Marines, bad Marines, whatever.
There you go.
And, you know, good felons, bad felons, you know, we're all around. So I sit here and, you know, I remember we're driving off and I just was like, dude, I am not a good God. Like, if I keep doing this my way, if I keep on like, what am I trying to do? And then that's when I started to be like, you're trying to find fulfillment in life and you're taking freaking shortcuts. And you think that this feeling that you get from these drugs and things like this, because you got to remember too, at this point, I was already making 6 figures at 21. And that's back when like, you know, 6 figures was like good money for a veteran, just got out of the military. Like I was killing it. I was in 7 diamond hotels around the world, traveling on private aircraft with VIPs. Like I was operating at a high level. I had the dream life, right? And I just remember being like, and you're not happy, so you're trying to find dopamine from these little, you know, from drugs and this and that because your life sucks because you haven't figured it out. You don't have fulfillment yet. And so I just switched it, you know, and I was like, you know, Father, you got to show me the way. Like, what do you want me to do? And I started to go back to my roots, which was being a warrior. And I declared my new war was going to be my level of service, was going to be the businesses I was able to create. Like, you know, you want to become something, you want to figure something out, go into business. You think life's boring, veteran? You think like, oh, I remember the good old days when I was in war. Okay, cool, bro. Try becoming an entrepreneur. Totally. Like, totally. And that is a war in and of itself. Totally. And so
try being a really good father.
Try to be a really good father, a really good husband, totally. A really good, you know. And so I started to kind of be like, dude, you need to take that engine and apply it to the most important things in life. And then what you find is fun is like freaking dessert. Like it's cheap, it's sin, it is to miss the mark in so many cases. Not like in the religious sense, but the archery term, to miss the mark. Like I can either take a drug and experience a whole bunch of dopamine tonight that might cost me all kinds of trash and shave off my cerebral cortex, or I can work really hard for like a couple years and create some value, have respect in people's eyes everywhere I go, have my family and everyone respect me because they see the long days, the early mornings and the vacays and whatever. And I can live in a state of fulfillment, right?
That's so cool.
And so that I literally said, and that's what I talk about in my books. So I tell dudes, I'm like, you need to find your new fight. A warrior without a war is soulless. You will die. You will kill yourself. That wolf will eat you. I put that wolf to work every single day to serve.
Wow. I love that.
Good question.
I love that. You've already gone there a little bit, but just tell me a little bit with how this kind of, you know, your experience, your philosophies, your failures, your successes, your experience with like, you know, real, you know, valor and courage, and also with like, you know, you've seen the depths of how ugly human beings can get.
And that's quite an education I've found to be very effective, especially in an ocean of people that haven't seen that. I've never
For sure.
realized how important that is.
So so how does that affect the father you are and raising, in raising kid, not even just raising, but just raising kids in general? Like, how do you approach it?
Yeah, man, I think it's such a good education, man. Like I said, I really thank God for the palette of challenges that I've been able to just lock up with in life and deal with in life. Because with every one of those experiences, it just makes me so better, so much better to lead, to help. Everything that doesn't kill you, yeah, makes you stronger. But like, if you actually come through it, you have a superpower to help other people who struggle with it. I can talk to a veteran who's been to war and has been blown up a bunch of times. I can talk to a dude who's doing drugs, and thinks it's like cool and chill or whatever, and like wants to change his life. Like, I can talk to, people that are going through things that I have those experiences with. And I think I have a much more realistic perspective on it, and I've found that brings just a higher level of education and peace to it,
Mm-hmm.
like, if I'm watching my little dude get banged up, while he's training or trying to do something, I'm not going to run in there. I know what life did to me. I know what life asked of me, and I know how much I could take before anything really serious happened.
Yeah,
I know how
he's
many times I
fine.
got beat up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I remember challenging the karate tournament winner one time after he won the karate tournament and getting beat down in front of everybody afterwards. And I was fine.
Yeah.
I think that education on the darker side of life is one of the most important educations you can have.
For sure.
Because I'm not sitting there being like, guns are evil,
Yeah.
with no experience. I'm sitting there going, guns saved my mother freaking life.
Right.
I watched guns stop women from getting raped and the whole entire villages from getting the men beheaded and the women sold into slavery. I've watched guns, you know what I'm saying? And so that education, and I also know one of the most motivating things for a guy like me is I know how evil humans can get.
Straight up.
I know how important it is. Like, pray like you believe in God, train like he is not freaking coming, and let him meet you on the battlefield and
I love that.
slay your freaking enemies. You know what I'm saying? But like, I know how bad things really can get. Like, these dudes that are like, oh yeah, if there's a civil war, we got so many guns, we're gonna win. I'm like, homie, you do not want that.
Yeah.
Sleep in your beautiful bed.
Yeah.
Do everything tonight with your family. Sleep all night. Don't worry about people kicking in the door and you fighting for your life in front of your women and children, right? Don't worry about, the first thing they're going to do is shut the power off. And then you're going to have to worry about us cannibalizing each other for like just enjoy your beautiful life. Treat people awesome. And let's do everything we can to preserve our freedoms before it comes to that, man.
That's right.
Like, because I've seen what happens in countries where that's the case, and so I think that it makes you a more accurate teacher to learn from. All that education on the dark side.
Sure.
Your sons, your daughters, your wives, your fellow employees, you become a more accurate human. The more you know about the dark and the light, I believe.
Are there times with your children where you do step in, and when does that happen? Do you have a fear? Like, it sounds like, I think about your old man at the wave pool, like, hey motherfucker, like, you better
Sink
swim
or
in,
swim,
go get the
homie.
boat out of the reef. Like, that really has resonance with me. And I know, look, it's always those old stodgy. I think about, taking the subway and the bus to school. And then I think about my kids living in Ojai and like the shit that getting jumped, getting your stuff. Like, my kids don't have to deal with any of that shit,
Right.
but my kids have been training since they were 3. Like, I say to my kid all the time, like, the 10-year-old version of you would beat the fuck out of the 10-year-old version of me. Because, like,
awesome.
I'm not. But there's these skills that.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you teach them these things? Is there anything that scares you? Is your faith so complete that, hey, come hell or high water, I want to throw them out there into the world, and whatever the fuck happens, like, they can learn.
Yeah, no, I think it's a question of stewardship. It's really a question of, me being, the Father giving me the wisdom to create the highest quality human possible. And really, for me, it's all about, is it really danger or is it fear, right? Yeah. So like, when my dad had me swimming through the lazy river, like, he was watching me. He would pop up and, you know, see me sitting there doggy paddling through people. And he was so proud of me, you know. When I had to swim back out there and get my boat, he came down, he was standing on the shore watching me, you know.
And had you gotten into trouble, he would have been in there.
He would have come and got me. He'd have got me. Yeah. So I think it's making them struggle, but it's a controlled environment, right?
And understand that struggle is everything. It's there's no better way to learn than to struggle, 100%. Fail, fuck, I'm gonna die.
I'm gonna die. Keep going. Your dad knows you're not
gonna.
But like to you, you know, you're like, oh my gosh, does he even love me? This man, you know. And so, you know, like I think it's all about, but also though, man, like getting your little dudes on the mats, man, getting them up into like lifting those weights and unlocking all those positive endorphins at this age and getting choked out. And like there's so much immense character development and just character development. The value that comes from that, that's really the way. I think that like the Nerf or childproof scissor way to like get character into a human is physical exertion. You know what I mean?
Agreed.
Because it's like, man, that is like the cheat code to developing good character. Consistent physical training.
Well, and it's something that you have control. I mean, you can get locked. You can be in the joint. You can still do that. That's why you see so many the folks who come out of there who are evolved, who are rehabilitated, who come out and they're ready to, you know, they've had that conversation. Hey, you know, like, what was it like? I'll go hard in the paint.
Yeah,
you know,
bro.
Like
I will go all the way, man.
It's the people that have really done that, and I think, you know, other things. I just think about with my kids. You know, when we're successful, it's you know, are we spending real time, you know, around folks and with folks who have way less than we do, and do we see in which ways they have more? Like, do we see? Are we feeding the homeless? Like, are we traveling the world? Are we in other environments? Are you getting out of your? Are we reading books? Are we watching? Are we watching films where they can learn from? Are we developing a sense of humanity? The one thing that we can really be control of is this physical vessel that we're here,
and it's your physical body. I always tell dudes, when I look at you, I see your standards. I see your physical fitness standards. You know, if I watch you with your lady, I'll see your relational standards. Like the fruit of physical fitness, this tells me how emotionally intelligent you are, how much you're able to control yourself, how disciplined, how consistent, how determined you are, like how seriously you take stewardship of your enterprise, your body. Like it is the fruit. Once you're at a certain age, it's like this is the fruit of the quality of human you are in a lot of ways. You know what I'm saying? And not always, but in a lot of ways. You know what I'm saying? This is a compounding effect of your decisions. Like we're adding it up, homie, you know? Yeah. And so it's a huge signal, man. And it's a tough signal to fake. Yeah. Doesn't mean necessarily that they have the best character, but it tells me a lot about that person. And so, yeah, man, I'm huge on it. But also you said something else when it comes to like developing good quality humans, and that's perspective. You know, something that my dad did that I think was really good was ever since I was little, I was going on mission trips to Haiti, Grenada, Juarez, Mexico, and all these different places where I was able to like get punched in the face with the reality of how blessed I really am.
Especially coming up in this country.
Yeah, bro.
And like, you know, if that's all you know, it's like
you'll turn into a bowl of Jello.
But you don't realize how lucky you are to be 100%. Here. You know,
you already hit the lottery twice. You were born. There's a couple million things that could have went wrong there. That's right. And now you're here. That's right. With food in your fridge, pissed off because they ain't put enough ice in your Starbucks, you know, frappuccino. You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that perspective, man. I mean, I remember being on some trips, you know, where we're driving across the border and certain kids just start crying because they're like, oh my gosh, you know, but it makes better humans. And then you spend a week out there building a church or building something with them with your hands, you know, like I think those things are amazing for that perspective.
Wow. And what would you do? Like you get the keys to the kingdom, man.
Like do anything I want, bro.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
What do we do? What do we
do? I just think we need to. I think that
Would you ever say mandatory military service?
I would love to, man. I think like, yeah, bro. Let's get in there. Let's do 2 years. You know, I didn't grow up with my dad, but I'd say that like getting in there with a bunch of strong, hard dudes that gave me the right perspective on problems and how hard I really need to go in the paint and all these different things. I think it would fix the problem really, really quickly. And no more PC anything. Your feelings aren't God. Your results, homie. You know what I'm saying? Like all that matters is what you can achieve, you know? But I would say, yeah, mandatory military would be
awesome. You don't have to go to war, but get through boot camp, player. You know what I'm saying?
Or
I
service,
think, or
you know
service,
what I mean?
yeah,
Or
yeah.
service, yeah. Like go
Something.
fucking work on the farm for America. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah. I think there's something really,
Build
really
bridges for
spiritual and
America.
awesome that happens when you work with your hands. I lived in Orange County. I moved down to like Marietta. I just wanted to be around blue collar folks, bro. I like dudes when I can look in the eyes and they say they're not too insecure to say good morning, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like, what you need, man.
Yeah.
Like, I love being around working class. That's my class, you know. And so, I I think that there's so many different ways that men and women and Americans have been attacked. That I would start with, you know, education's big, you know. What the media's done in terms of people's values, I think is so corrosive, you know. So I would start with the school systems. Mandatory military is a really good one. Re-educating people on like how to eat even, you know what I'm saying? Because, you know, once you've suffered a lot of the biological damage that comes from eating high estrogen foods and things like that, man, it's hard to clean your system out and even get it to act normal. You'll be on a diet and nothing's happening and you don't know why, you know? So, you know, and that's why I joined forces with Sid and those dudes, man, because I get dudes through my training that are just not physically potent enough. And I'm like, okay, well, you need to have the look. You need to have a client feel like they would pay you 6 figures to protect their family. So we got to solve some equations, you know, and you know, so yeah, if I could do anything, I would attack schools. I would attack education. I would probably go with you on mandatory service of some type. Yeah, man. And I would get God back into the mix. You know, I think that's that spiritual development that's necessary.
Beautiful. All right. Hey, bro, thank you for this, man. Do you have anything you want to ask me or anything else you want to say?
No, man, I think for me, you know, it's just, I guess, you know, if I was going to say one last thing, I would just want people to really think about where we're at in time and space in America and in the world. You know, things are happening. Things aren't about to happen. Things are happening. You know, we're moving in a direction. And I think that people, in so many ways are in apathy and or are waiting to be rescued. Yeah. And I want everyone to realize that what one person can do is so powerful. You know, like I was just a little chubby little mama's boy at one point who had no idea how I would ever be significant and ever do anything significant in the world, you know? And now, you know, I have people telling me constantly like, man, dude, you really helped my life, you know? You really helped me, you know, get the career I want with my life. I have, you know, important people say, hey, thank you for taking care of my family, you know? And it's so awesome to live a life where you're receiving honor for, you know, the hard work that you're able to do by the grace of God. But I think that people don't realize that that can be them if they're willing to just, there's nothing magical about it. It's just put in the work, you know, find out what it is that you were created to do. Ask God for guidance, and he's not going to tell you right off the bat and go with your first best guess and start hammering, dude. And the path, it's all about that journey. And where we're at in the world and in the nation, stop waiting for anybody, any politician, anything and anyone to save you. Figure out how you can fight your fight. If we all go down, let us go down with you looking in the mirror and being like, hey, you know what? I voted with my dollars. I tried to raise my kid the best what I could. Yeah, I did my thing. I started a group. I started a parallel organization to give people a choice between going to that school or another school or whatever it is. The thing is, every single person has a gift, a skill, a capability. You know how many moms have wreaked havoc on whole entire school systems, and like Mothers of America, you know what I mean? Like they got in there and made us change everything in the Marine Corps. We hated it, but it shows you how like impactful people can be when they're like, I'm going to do something about this. Whether it's, you know, hopefully it's not in a combative way, but it's just a constructive, how can I really impact this? Maybe I start a farm. You know, maybe, you know, so I want people to realize that, like, look, maybe some politician or someone decides to change everything, and maybe that's what happens. Maybe God shows up and, like, abracadabras everything. Probably not, though, player. Probably not. Probably what's going to happen if, you know, if things get better in the world is, like, a number of people say, you know what, I'm going to help this,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
I'm going to do what I can do.
And I think with that, man, it brings up one of the things, I think even about like, doing this show, it's like we talk about it. It's like, you go around and people come up to you and they're like, hey man, that like that really impacted me, or hey, I was a little bit lost, and now it's not that it just happened the other day. I was coaching my kids tackle football. We were playing this team. And the coach came up to me afterwards, and his kids were savages, you know what I mean? And we it was a good ass game. And afterwards he pulled me aside. He's like, look, man, I'm 6 months sober, been listening to your thing, man. Like, I love I'm here for my kid, and it's like, keep that shit up, dude. Like, keep that shit up, you know what I mean? And there's so many young men that I find that do feel a little bit lost. And one thing that I notice is like there's such an energy out there among so many people, and I really look at them as fakers, where they're always trying to tell you how they're telling the youth, they're telling the lost that it's so hard to get found. And I find people who like actually are actually like there, like walking the walk, it's always the opposite. Like they're always like, dude, you could like this shit is not it's not that
hard. Just come and start.
And it's like I always go back to my man Rich Wilson, in Shreveport, Louisiana. Again, I always go back to fatherhood because that's the thing that I care about the most. It's the thing that's the hardest for me, that I put everything into, and it's the reason why I'm here. It's the reason why I talk to people like yourself. And I remember Rich, like he was saying, like, gangster got was getting taken away when he was 18, thought he'd never see his kids anymore, like got sick, didn't go that way. Now he's raised like these incredible kids down there. He's an incredible father, a guy that like I really look up to. And I remember I just had my second, who's little Bill Bernthal, who's now 11. I remember me like, man, how do you do it? Like, what's the key?
Is he got
father?
some cheat
like,
codes?
what do you
got?
Yeah. And he was just like, look, man, like all that shit that you want all that shit that you don't want your kid to do, stop doing it. Stop lying. Stop exaggerating. Stop bullshit. Stop cheating. Stop taking shortcuts. Just man, like everything that you want him to do, just do that.
Do that right in front of him.
Just do that. But you know what I mean?
We're gonna do our push-ups this morning.
Just do it. And not Anyway, I really appreciate you, man. This has been awesome for me, and I appreciate you coming on. And thank you for letting us have him for the day. All right.
Yo, it's an honor, brother. Much love and respect.
Much love to you.